hope we.
Where you guys like?
I'm down by the water. Anybody want to walk?
Yeah, we have. Just. This one. Yeah. And then here it is with different.
Yeah. Very interested.
You got 71%. You have gold.
I want to bring the business to the people who want, whether they're going to like one town or somewhere else to shop for. I'll bring that down here. That data, I think, will be helpful. In those areas, yeah.
That we value not only to the right small businesses American Airlines, we all know American Airlines. We know that the loyalty platform credit card is worth 3 times
The business.
what American Airlines is.
Yeah.
3 times.
There's some statistics and people say that like once that is their business, it's not the flights, it's the damn credit card.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. An exciting afternoon left. We want to make sure that we ask everyone to come on in, have a seat, don't be shy. This is going to be a super exciting conversation with some real heavy hitters up here. That's you guys. Welcome back again to CoMotion. I know it's been a packed couple of days. Again, starting off the afternoon with a great panel. I want to go ahead and turn it over to John Penny, who's going to go ahead and moderate this great panel.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Vivian. Really appreciate it.
Applause.
For the panel. So it's great to have you. Thank you for being the first wave of people here. The good news is we are talking about a spectacularly interesting topic. And it's not only interesting because of the content, but also interesting because there are parts of this topic that you just wouldn't imagine when you first hear about it, how deep and broad this goes. I'm a business strategist. I work with CoMotion on growth and have focused in my last 5 years on climate technology and scaling city-scale climate technologies. But I'm not the ones you're here for. It's these guys, and they're great. So I'm going to go down the row. They're going to introduce themselves. I'm going to frame it up. We're going to have a really cool dialogue. I can almost promise you, because I heard what they were going to say. I loved it. And then we'll open it up a little bit, towards the end for some questions. So Jimmy, can you start us off?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Jimmy Morales, Chief Operating Officer for Miami-Dade County, and my portfolio is a lot about mobility, transportation and public works, aviation, Port Miami, so transportation is very much part of what we do.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Andres Polo, and I lead urban mobility initiatives for Visa for all of Latin America and the Caribbean, so that's 44 markets, really close and down the street from where we are. But before that, I led strategic partnerships and innovation for all of our sponsorships, which include a couple of key events that are happening here next week, like Formula One, FIFA, as well as the Olympics.
Good afternoon. I'm Ray Martinez. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the FIFA World Cup 2026 Miami Host Committee. Just for clarification, I am not FIFA. We are part of the host committee, so here locally for Miami. My background is actually in local law enforcement. I spent 35 years in local law enforcement here, and retired in 2014 and kind of fell into the event world. I was the president and CEO of the Super Bowl for 2020 that was hosted here in Miami.
How's it going, everybody? My name is Michaeljohn Green. I'm the Chief of Economic Development and Strategy for the Miami DDA. The DDA is a quasi-governmental entity spurred with economic development in the downtown area, which we are in right now. And my background has been split between wealth management and then I would say community development. So I started a couple different CDFIs. I used to work for JP Morgan and the Bank of Montreal.
That's great. I used to work for Chase before it was JP Morgan. It was a long time ago. So how many here in the audience are soccer, football fans, really regularly follow it? Okay, this is great. Fantastic. So what we're going to talk about today is the notion of a mega event, and there's sort of almost nothing like the World Cup in size and scale. 1.5 billion TV viewers around the globe. You have roughly 40 nationalities, competing. It'll be North America. We'll have somewhere in the range of 6 million people coming potentially for, and maybe a little north of that. This will be bigger than the last record, which was weirdly enough a while ago in 1994. And what is going to happen is something extraordinary because the World Cup is extraordinary. It's also going to be happening in an extraordinary place. And that's right here in Miami-Dade County. And the important thing to remember is that our panel is about bridging this amazing moment of an event that does not happen every year with creating long-term beneficial impacts, lasting is what they put in the title, for the community. But just a couple of things about Miami-Dade. The county is 2.7 million people. It's the 7th largest U.S. county. I'm from New York City, but now live in LA, so this was my learning. You probably all know this stuff. It's incredibly high growth right now. It's leading in so many categories around economic and even social and other sorts of metrics of hopefully, broad and equitable benefits that we're putting a mega event into an incredibly fertile soil. So it's like planting an incredible fast-growing tree into a soil that's rich in potassium, nitrogen, water, and the rest. And so we're going to talk about it in a dialogue about the benefits it brings, some of the amazing statistics behind the event, and obviously the challenges, because this is not easy to stage, nor is it easy to gain lasting impact. And of course, because we're in a CoMotion lens, we're going to talk a lot about and hopefully think about the long-term impacts on mobility as they transform individuals' lives in the here and now and over the long term, and not just in certain communities, knock wood, but in the broader scheme of what we consider the totality of the population of Miami-Dade. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to throw this to Jimmy first with a question. So it's my understanding, and we checked, that 11 Super Bowls have been held here. Now that is a US mega event, the Super Bowl, right? About 100 million viewers on TV, so it's a big event. So we've done 11, and the great thing is we've shined doing those. Can you tell us, we're getting ready for this event, and there are other big events here. What have we learned from those about creating lasting impact? And you could take that from angles that you feel the audience would benefit from hearing about.
Well, I think, it is part of our DNA in this community to put on big events. I mean, we started with the Super Bowl. I think our first one that we hosted was back in the late 60s. Fast forward to today, we've got 11 Super Bowls, numerous national championships, F1, Art Basel. I mean, we are a big event community. I think, and I think we have learned a lot, in terms of how to, we've focused on building out a public transportation system, and the community has a real commitment to it. Sadly, it's not going to be ready by next year, the line that would go up 27th Avenue to Hard Rock Stadium, which is our main venue. So I think what this event can do, and we're talking about 7 Super Bowls in about 2 to 3 weeks. I mean, so this is like a mega. This is mega event. Is how do we take our system that we have now, and recognizing that no public transportation system will always hit everywhere. How do we get the community, the visitors, the locals, to figure out what are the nodal points that we can move people from? Are there, use our existing lines, use shuttles, how do we, start to think about these events as permanently getting people out of their cars, even if a train doesn't go by, but getting them into some other mindset. And given the crowds at these things and the lack of access people will have, I think this may be an opportunity to even change our DNA a little bit on that.
I love that modal shift from the car to something else, and there's many ways to do that. Ray, coming from, again, the hosting organization and doing much of the planning, from the past and what you've learned and what we're going to see now, I'm just echoing the question for Jimmy. What do you see, and maybe throw in a few of the near-term challenges as well from your perspective, to, making this have a lasting impact? Or maybe if you had a magic wand, could move whatever you want to move faster.
Yeah, well, like Jimmy said, obviously, we're not going to have the rail line up by, next year. But I think it's an incredible opportunity. We're working together, obviously, with the host committee and the county. They are the transportation department. They're a large regional, service provider here for Miami-Dade County. We could not do this without them. But this has given us an opportunity to kind of look at this event almost on a blank slate, and take a look at the stadium and the stadium transportation side for what they normally do for Dolphin games, games, or whatever else they're hosting at the stadium, and kind of wiping that clean and saying, okay, how do we make this better? Right. We've got 65,000 people coming to the matches. A lot of them, or probably most of them, if not all, are not going to be from here. They're going to be tourists traveling into the city here. So how do we use what we have, as Jimmy said, and make it better? And I think that's the incredible opportunity that we have. Just real quick, one of the things is, we have the second longest tournament period. And what that means, from our first match to our last match, only New York, New Jersey has a longer period. It's 33 days. There's only 7 days of matches. So there's 27 days, 26 days of people that are going to be in our community, moving about, doing things, traveling in and out, watching their teams and whatnot. So again, I just think it's an incredible opportunity for us to really work together, and bring some solutions that will be here beyond the World Cup.
I like that framework too. When you get to look at something with a blanker sheet of paper, you get to often innovate in different ways than if you have to retrofit on the fly something that's very, very static and pre-existing. And it brings me to a thought. We're going to go really macro for a second, and then we're going to come back down to the more local side. And what I'd like to do is turn it over to Andreas, because Visa and your work within not only sport and what you do is a global transaction processor. The processing in transit alone, 65,000 transactions every minute or second? Second. I was off by 60, so that's a huge number. But what's really interesting is Visa sees what's going on through its member bank network, what people are doing when they're traveling and at home around the world. Not for creepy purposes, but for understanding how things actually can be made more efficient and better. And I'd like to turn it over to you, because you had some great thoughts in our prior conversation about talking about what Jimmy and Ray mentioned, and creating almost a fabric and a behavioral shift that can last beyond the game.
Perfect. Yeah, no, thanks. And I'll talk a little bit about, what we've done and how we have used urban mobility as a catalyst. And I'm going to go back to 2012. In 2012, London came to us because they were hosting another mega event. And this time it was the London Olympics. And they needed a way to provide a seamless way for all of the visitors that would come to London to leverage transit, but also an easy way for them to pay and for the merchants to get paid. What we work with them is implementing contactless payments, and we heard it on the last panel on open loop. So we work with the Transport for London, implementing tap to ride on transit. What that did is help every traveler that came to London that did not know, how do I take public transportation? What do I need to do? Where do I buy a card? What's the exchange rate? How much does it cost for me to go from point A to point B? And made it seamless, made it secure, and made it easy for them to understand. So I think for us is looking first and foremost, how do we make the process easy for our visitors? And then leave a legacy for the residents. If we look now at London, 13 years after that, what they've seen is a great implementation of contactless payments, not only in transit, but across all of the merchants that support the city.
That's great, because I don't know if you remember, but like 10 years ago I went to London, and I had gotten some pounds in advance to take the Heathrow Express and everything. And it had been completely converted to contactless, and I could have just pulled out my phone. And it just changed the way I saw it. Now, this is a high-end issue. What we know is that everything in the world of where we are around mega events has to have some sort of business rationale at some point somewhere. And that might be either publicly supported or not. But one of the things is the transformation of local economies so that, as the mayor said this morning, you drive lasting incremental impact from bringing people here at an event to transitioning that into something more longer term and long lasting. And Michaeljohn, I know this is an area where you have strong expertise in terms of driving value creation in the more local community. Can you talk about the notion of the mega event in terms of how you could use, or how you will use this to spur opportunity?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I would say is that, this is a mega event, but all of the events have had an impact on Miami, right? As people across the world will see this on TV, that has a reverberating effect for everybody here and telling the story. I think more now than ever, people want to hear and see a Miami story. This is our moment right now, and so I think that that's going to be huge. From the small business perspective and just really being ready, and again, I mentioned my wealth management background and really trying to leverage and thinking about leverage and leveraging that moment. We want to make sure that our small businesses are prepared, but we also want to, be able to provide opportunity to everybody that's in the county. Large portion of our hotels and the hotel infrastructure exist on the east side of 95, right? And so a majority of people will be staying within the DDA area, on the beach. And so how do we get opportunities to the business that is in Homestead, Alapata, Hialeah, Opelika? And so I had some conversations just a couple days ago with Ray and others, and really trying to put together a program that helps not only, one, shed some light on some of the vacant spots that we have down here, but getting some of those businesses and bringing them across the other side of 95 for that 33, 45-day period, and being able to have a temporary pop-up so they're able to experience and access those dollars and those Visa cards that people are going to be able to be using, right? And I think that, it truly, really all is about taking true advantage and leveraging the opportunity. The DDA, we probably will put, as we talk about mobility, more freebies. The freebies are a free electric golf cart that drives people around downtown. One of the great things about visitors coming to Miami, especially from other places that have mass transit, they use our mass transit more than us. And so continuing to put that information out there, continuing to highlight that, but also working with all of our partners. True economic development doesn't happen without massive amounts of partnerships. And so working with Jimmy at the county and doing what we can to make sure that they're clean, easy to access, that there are as many of them as we can put out there as possible, and then using the opportunities that we have with our social media, some of our other partners, to drive business to those businesses. I want as many dollars that can be spent at small mom and pop local businesses in Miami to happen. And for the opportunity of FIFA, that is really truly my main charge, what I'm really focusing on, and how can we create those direct pipelines so the individual that comes from Argentina and spending a couple days here, they have a cafecito at a restaurant that's down here, and they eat dinner somewhere down here at not a major big chain restaurant, but something that's here that's local. And so that's what we're focused on.
That's great. And one thing that I heard there is that diffusion effect from a downtown development area into the community through small business. And that through a thought that I wanted to throw at Jimmy, because is there ways that you're also thinking about the communities that are further out, not like right within the core area, besides the economic transfer, which is super valuable from small business? Are there other opportunities from the mega events that can spread into those areas as well?
Yeah, we've learned some of this from previous events. I mean, when we do, for example, Super Bowls or national championship games, we have legacy projects. So the game may be at the Hard Rock, but the NFL will build a football field for a high school in South Dade or in Fort Lauderdale. And so these legacy projects, and I think FIFA is going to do something similar. Secondly, the county commission made it very clear that they want, as part of our being a sponsor, maybe some activation soccer related, not only in Bayfront Park and at Hard Rock, but perhaps some smaller activations in other locations. And Art Basel's been a great example of that. Art Basel started inside that convention center on Miami Beach, but it has turned now that you have art, during Basel Week, you have from the South Dade Community Center up to Broward now, you have activations. So I think there are opportunities, and I think soccer, like art, is something that really translates to everybody. There's an opportunity to, from whether it's a business perspective, an educational perspective, and certainly an economic perspective, impact-wise, to have a broader impact than just Bayfront Park and Hard Rock.
I like that and the wonderfully, international nature of it too. Michaeljohn, you want to add
Yeah, I
something?
just want to touch on that, just the opportunities. The DDA has built a partnership with FC Barcelona. Being able to leverage and
heard of
realize
that.
that moment and how, impactful the World Cup is going to be. FC Barcelona has moved from New York and they're making Miami their domestic world headquarters. If you would like to see Messi's Ballon d'Or trophy, Lamine Yamal's shoes, or the oldest soccer jersey in the world, 3 blocks away from here, you can go to the securities building 6 o'clock tonight, and they have all of those items there. For Miami, bringing the business here,
Right.
those will be jobs here.
Right.
Their relationship with Nike and those deals, if they're not doing it in Barcelona, that will be here now in Miami. Their deal with Spotify, they will negotiate that here now in Miami. That's hotel stays, that's jobs, that's a reverberating effect that goes outside of just the Hard Rock.
Brilliant. And I was at the Barcelona Stadium in Spain and went to their museum and saw that. You guys should go see that here.
Second
It's
most
really cool.
visited museum
So-
in all of Spain.
Right. Yeah, it's unbelievable. So, Ray, we can basically say, this is the New Yorker saying this to the folks in Miami, you guys are the world's expert at mega events because of Super Bowl. That is just, 11 is extraordinary. And yet, there are a lot of other mega events that have gone around the world. We have in LA, World Cup, we have Super Bowl, and then we have the Olympics. Your committee talks to other committees from around the world for learnings and, hey, don't do this, you'd be really crazy to do that or something. Can you tell us a little about what you're learning from others around the world in terms of, we'll call it transformational type of potential change, or just issues that have come up that you were like, whoa, didn't even think of that?
Yeah, so, as you said, we're one of 11 U.S. cities. So we have a weekly standing call on Fridays with the other 10 cities, their CEO plus one. I happen to be the plus one in our group. And it's really refreshing in a lot of ways because we feel we're struggling sometimes. We're trying to do our planning, we're trying to do our fundraising, we're putting plans in place, and we really feel like we're struggling and not where we should be. And then we get on the call, and then I turn to the CEO, Alina Hudak, and I say, we're better off than most of these people here. We're farther along than they are. But I think we'll all get there, So there are a lot of lessons, Everybody's got their little niche. Some cities are better at the transportation aspect. Some are doing well with, safety and security. Some may be doing better with fundraising, coming up with some creative ways to address, and raise money. So, I mean, it's a whole host, but it really is. And then quarterly we meet. We come together and we'll meet with the other host cities. And, when you have the face-to-face, it's really, where you get a lot of exchange of ideas and whatnot.
So working with that, when you hear that, it's great because it's basically you plugging into another collective data set, but it's a person-to-person data set who have staged these things. Let's take that and think about a company that is plugged into data sets all over the world and events, Visa. And how do you start to think about and I'm not actually saying the data architecture for the event, but the notion of being able to see the data and then to be able to help the different constituents. We've mentioned local businesses. It could be much larger businesses too. It could be transit authorities. It could be so many things. Andreas, how do you think about that aspect of data through the financial transactions coming together to support change and opportunity?
That's a great question. I was going to kind of talk about MJ about this, but we currently have 4.8 billion credentials in people's hands. So think about the insane amount of data that we see.
There's only 8 billion people on the planet.
Exactly, right. Well, Jimmy told me he has 2 Visa cards, by the way. But at the end of the day, what we want to do is empower the cities with data that they can utilize to support the growth of small businesses, to support the ability to move people seamlessly. And how do we do that? We know when a person buys a ticket from Manchester, right? And we want to ensure that that person has a complete seamless experience. So let's just say that I'm a football fan and I'm in Manchester, England, and I want to come to the U.S., to Miami to see a match. Mm-hmm. It all starts here. It all starts in a mobile phone now. Let's not think that it doesn't. It all starts on the mobile phone. They look at the match. They look at the airfare. We know when they purchase that ticket. We know when they're flying. We can provide that information. We know when they land, and we can help them understand that they can utilize that card that they use at home to tap to ride transit in Miami. We can help them identify those hidden gems, those hidden local gems that they all want to see. They all want to take the picture of and share it with their friends because I went and I had the best cafecito at a window that nobody else knew about, or I had the best Cuban sandwich in a cafe in the middle of Alapata. So those are the type of things that we can start to share with cities and say, where are people like you transacting, and provide personalized experiences rather than generic experiences. So I think it's leveraging data to provide a better experience for users and to drive economic development in the city.
I like that. Now let's take that, which is a unique viewpoint when you capture that much of what's going on, and there are that many endpoints that we just heard about in all of our phones and wallets. And we think about a problem that we all have here in, not Miami, but in the US. It's a bigger issue than others. It's fragmentation in systems thinking. So these are broad social systems that we're dealing with. They're called cities, and they have events, and they have infrastructure, they have people, they have financial, their security. There are so many layers to these systems. But our whole world, all the way back to academic institutions and departments or doctors and specialties, are absolutely thin slices. And no one ever solved a systems problem in a silo. I'll say it again, no one ever solved a systems problem in a silo. Unfortunately, we all deal with silos all the time. So anybody can pick up this question of how you're trying to get around what they talked about on the public-private partnership panel, which is, if you've seen one public-private partnership, you've seen one public-private partnership, to being able to work across in a way that inspires lasting working across, not just for one event, so that you guys can then have the next big thing that happens. It may not be a mega event, it may be something around, education or whatever, where people now work together in a different way. So are there any ways that you're seeing silos sort of eroding, or you're busting them down, or is it still just slogging through verticals to try and solve a systems problem?
I mean, I think that's something that we're always working on, right? I think
Good.
everybody is always working on it. I think that from the DDA perspective, we have a permit clinic. Sometimes people who live in Miami might know that the permit process might leave much to be desired. But what we were able to do there, and what it really is about bringing people together. So at the permit clinic every Thursday, you have individuals from every single major permitting department, water, sewer, fire, DERM, all of that, sitting at a table so you can have those face-to-face conversations and hopefully move things quicker through, right? As I was talking to Andres, data. Everybody is holding on to their data like it is the most valuable thing, and it really, really is. But the value sometimes is going to be in sharing that data with others, and so that we can make decisions. I've been in the DDA now for about a year and some change, and one of the things, the first thing I did is really trying to figure out what data we have, which I would say was woefully, under what we should have, but then trying to find ways, whether that's a Placer AI that's basically a peeper counter of people's phones. Hopefully we'll work with Andres and get some data from Visa, working with the city, the county to get data to really be able to make thoughtful decisions. I think sometimes, hopefully over my career, I've built a really good gut of knowing what maybe the right thing is. But if you're not able to back that up with data and the board and different things like that, it's not going to hit the same. Yep. And so being able to partner with everybody to get that, I think is important.
And I think Jimmy just want to add.
I was going to talk because I think data is great, but when you aggregate data from different sources, then that's the aha moment. Yeah. And when you think about Uber, wasn't great because you could call a car in your phone. It was great because they were able to bring the Google Maps, they were able to bring seamless payments all into one aspect rather than them just focusing on one thing. So it's understanding what data do I have and how can I augment that data to provide value to our end users, be it citizens, be it visitors, or be it football
I
fans.
think that's a great point. I just want to use a term. I teach a couple classes, and I call what Andreas just said synthetic innovation. We get often very tied up in the notion of original, purely original innovation, a new material, a new molecule, a new service. But it's the synthetic opportunities that break down silos to lead to greater value. I'm sorry, you wanted to say something. Go ahead.
I've been involved in a lot of large events over the years. I've never seen the level of coordination that I'm seeing through the FIFA process. And I don't know if that's a testament to the committee, the host committee, if that's the way FIFA functions, or just this group of individuals. But we are on probably bi-weekly phone calls with stakeholders. There's probably a monthly one with the national, with all of the host cities. Then I know at the county we're doing individual, there's a security committee, then there's a mobility committee, et cetera, and then we all get together. So there really is a lot of coordination here, like I've never seen before with maybe Super Bowl host committee or things like that, where maybe there's more silos here. And part of it is, we've never done this before, so we're really trying to learn from everybody and anybody we can, and hopefully you'll see the proof in the pudding. But I think the level of coordination here, if we fail, it won't be for lack of coordination.
Right, and that's a great point, because what you brought up in my mind is that there's a mantra in Silicon Valley attributed to one person, which is move fast and break things. And that doesn't work in a lot of places. If you're in an emergency room or you're flying planes, that does not work. But what does often work is something that you were just mentioning, and I'm wondering if this is going on, which is trying to put a predicted metric around your planning process or even the outcome you're looking for, and then checking back whether it was hit or not. I'm not talking just about a project plan, but are there KPIs you're evolving that could be useful for having more lasting impact in the city? Or is it just, it's moving so fast that sometimes that's hard to do? It could be for anybody.
I mean, I think the KPIs are a little bit of moving targets. I think we see them, right? More buildings going up downtown, I would argue, means that there's a lot of things going on, right? Sometimes the more buildings, but are they connecting to jobs, the traffic? I think that we have in Miami, right? 80% of the people that live in Homestead are coming this way for work, right? So some of the things we can see, and I think the good thing is that the ones that we can see, as we make some of those changes, we hopefully will see them change. The more that you're able to develop and put corporations in the Homestead area, the less traffic that there might be this way, right? The more mass transit that we put, the more investments that we make in the freebie and different things like that, fewer people are in their cars. Hopefully that, again, pulls off of the traffic a little bit. So some of those things, I think that we can see them. I do think that we need to continue to work together, continue to have KPIs. I know the mayor put out her, economic development plan, and what she has is some of the things that she wants to see happen. We are now a climate tech hub, right? And so I know that that's one of the goals in moving that forward. What Mayor Suarez and others and Matt Hagman and the Medina family have done for technology, and we've seen that transition and change here and continue to grow. I think that those are all kind of flags or KPIs that people have put out, and we're seeing them move in that direction.
Right. And so just one recommended thing, and no one asked for my recommendation, but is to try and figure out what the incremental impact is, because you're exactly right. If you see it and can attribute it, then you can use that to build longer term lasting value. Which brings me to Ray. And Ray, you are at sort of that moment where you're bridging, gosh, those other places that are doing this are having some of the same problems that we are. Is there a collective spirit of problem solving across the cities too? Or is it, and I know it's almost like probably a nice glass of red wine to hear that somebody else, a mental glass of red wine to hear that somebody else is having the same problem. Is sharing, because you guys can help us in LA. I'm sure Paris's help can really help LA with the Olympics at CoMotion in LA. We had that dialogue. What's going on between these cities?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we're working together. Obviously, there is a little, you start off the call, there's a little bit of a gripe session, but then you get into the meat and potatoes of how, Dallas is handling something, or how Kansas City is handling something, or Boston, and you start to trigger some ideas that you could probably use here locally. So there's definitely that cohesion, if you will, between the host cities of working together and helping each other out. And then we always, have the ability, since we've really come close, to pick up the phone. If you're having an issue, pick up the phone and call LA or call, San Francisco or Seattle. And how are they doing it on the West Coast? We're over here on the East Coast. We think we know it all, but how are they doing it over there? How's Kansas City dealing with it?
Right. Go
And
ahead,
I'll
Jimmy.
tell you, as we're sitting here, correct me if I'm wrong, each of the host cities have people now in Washington, D.C. We've sent 2 folks from the county as we're trying to lobby Congress and get all the federal support we can get financially, security-wise, processing of visas, all that kind of stuff. So we do work together on those kind of issues.
Right.
When Kansas City reserved 200 buses, we heard about it. Why is
Yeah.
it? Miami-Dade, are you going to do that? So we are. I mean, we work together, and also even I think through FIFA, I think our folks have been briefed by folks from the last World Cup and their
Good.
experiences.
Right.
So there is trying to share knowledge. Again, I think, and by the way, we have that model. A bunch of us from Miami-Dade County were in Atlanta for the national championship game because next year we're hosting it, and we had seminars and briefings and whatnot. So we always try to learn from everyone we can, their mistakes and also their successes.
Does this ring in any way from each of your perspectives? So in the goal to bring greater efficiency to the staging and the building of everything we do, and I'll just roughly bring it down to a simple concept, which is reducing the amount of energy inputs and then increasing the amount of efficiency of any systems, social systems, hardware and manufacturing. That places a higher burden on doing things. So one of the things we hear in LA is, God, Paris did great numbers on CO2 pollution. And they have one of the most amazing metro systems. We don't have that. We have 2,200 buses in only LA's bus fleet. It's gonna need thousands more to borrow, right? So are there, do you ever feel like, and you don't have to say yes, you can jog, you can go a different direction, that the goalpost is sort of moved a little bit on, these are hard enough to deliver anyway, and now they're getting harder because the metrics are being evaluated almost at the full system level for efficiency and lower impact. And that is not an argument against being more efficient, but things take time to change. So how do you see that? Or maybe that's not even on the right track.
I think that what I'll say about that is I think that, I don't know if the goalpost has moved. I think that it's just complex problems. So the complexity of it all, Miami being on limestone, like there's never gonna, at least I don't know, maybe there's a genius out here in this room that's gonna put a subway somewhere in Miami and be able to figure out how to make that work. I think that it takes time too. I have to commend every single entrepreneur that was in Miami before I was here and what they've done to make this place the place that it is. But this is still a very relatively young city. Having CoMotion here and where we've gone as far as technology, I mean, I moved here 7-8 years ago. That wasn't even really a conversation
That's
around
true,
startups,
right,
right?
right.
What we've been able to do, what people have been able to do with our mayors, our leadership has been able to do in this short period of time, I think it's truly amazing. We can't be too hard on ourselves, but I think that we also can't stop. As the goalposts or the complex problems seem hugely complex, we still have to try to solve them,
agree, yeah.
work with people, and I hope that individuals in this room and technology helps lessen that gap so we are able to solve some of those.
I like that.
I'll add something.
Go ahead,
because I
Andres.
think, and I'm going to congratulate Jimmy and the team here in Miami-Dade County, because you need to build a strong foundation in order to grow for the future. And I'm going to focus on transit, and on the last panel you mentioned you implemented open loop payments in 2019. The reality is that there were very few other transit authorities in the US that took that leap of faith and said we're going to implement open loop payments. That creates a seamless and easier way to continue to grow, expand, and create better opportunities. We were talking in the green room that my daughter does not leave her house without this device. She will live without her purse, her wallet, but this device she carries. And she uses this to get on the metro rail, and she believes it's the best way of transportation. And I think having that foresight into the future and taking those leaps of faith and saying, oh, sorry, and taking, there you go.
Siri answered the question. Oh my gosh.
But taking those leaps of faith was going to help you get to those goalposts, even if they're moving.
Yes. So this is like, now we're going to twist into a different direction. So what we've talked about is sort of a top-down and infrastructure and planned and policy and an amazing 11 Super Bowl, mega event history here. I want to ask the audience, and it's not a specific, I want you to remember a mega event from your life that had a lasting impact. I'll give you mine. I remember going to a Bruce Springsteen concert. This is not recently because I could not afford to go to Bruce Springsteen and to get a good ticket anymore, seriously. But this is like 25 years ago. It was amazing. And it's just like flashbulb memory, they call it. So I bet we all have something like that, right? You got that. Okay. So this is a similar opportunity where from the community side, you can generate this incredible excitement, even in people who didn't know they were excited about football. And I'm going to give you the example from Paris and then let you run with how you're thinking about getting the person on the street just excited, because it's exciting anyway, is in Paris, I was reading, and I tested this. There's a Parisian here who I asked this question. In the beginning, they close off the islands in the middle of the city. There's a lot of retailers. Everybody was really annoyed. And most people said, I'm going to leave the city when this thing is going on. It's too much of a pain. And it was bad for small businesses. Then the event started going on. There were French athletes. It was an amazing opening ceremony that could have only been France. And people flocked back and became so filled with pride. And I think we're in a point in time where we all need a little uplift. The uncertainty that's around everybody, even without the most recent uncertainty, is always, difficult. How do you guys feel like the people out there are they getting excited about this, or are they just thinking, oh my God, more traffic? And what are you trying to do to encourage the excitement of Flashbulb?
I think one of the reasons a lot of us live in this community is its diversity, and a lot of people know, but maybe not. I mean, a majority of the people who live in Miami-Dade County were not even born in the United States. I think only London has a higher percentage of that. And so you will have probably, any team that comes through here probably has a local fan base.
Yes.
You go to the north end of Miami Beach, for example, it's Little Buenos Aires.
That's
and at
great.
the World Cup, they celebrate up there.
Yeah.
Or 8 years ago, they didn't celebrate as much. But and so I do think there's an opportunity. Not only are we Central and South America, strong European communities, et cetera. I mean, we have I think the largest consular corps outside of New York and Washington. So there's quite an international presence. So I do think World Cup here has an opportunity to not just all the people who come here, but really ignite the local communities with a passion.
I love that.
And that could also, in its own way, not just the visitors who are coming, but the local Argentinians who are here, or the local Uruguayans,
Right.
who will go to their favorite bar where they always go to watch the game, and that could create business opportunities and kinship all over the county.
Yeah, I like that. And I mean, that totally is it. And then it's taking that and building things that you're looking to do too on that energy. So were you going to?
I was going to say
go ahead.
the energy. What a massive moment and opportunity this is for soccer in general. If you think about
exactly
the small kid that lives in Doral that plays soccer, and I mean this with all due respect, it sees Messi and is excited and is watching Inter Miami, he's becoming a new soccer fan. This is the opportunity to really introduce him to the full game of soccer. It's almost, you said you live in LA, it's like going to watch Bronny James all the time and you don't know that LeBron James plays at the Staples Center.
Yeah, that's right.
This is an opportunity to make major new soccer fans and to really for soccer to take this leap in America to really become the great sport in America that it is, right? And so I think for FC Barcelona,
Right.
all of the other global soccer teams, Miami now has to be a spot that you look at as your domestic location to be able to access still the most powerful economic engine in the world, the U.S., and to be able to convert those fans to fans of your team while we are still waiting for MLS to really be able to grow so we can afford all of those players and bring them here, which I think will happen in 5, 10, 15 years. But at this moment right now, I mean, what better group to tie your engine to grow your international soccer team or whatever that would be than Miami. So I think that there's a huge amount of opportunity across the county when it comes to soccer, when it comes to the business of soccer and the business of sports, and really being able to ride hand in hand with Miami to drive your business forward.
Yeah, and actually it's a great point. And Ray, I'm going to come to you, but I just want to mention one thing. I was not a big I'm not a fan, but when I found out that Messi quotes himself at 5'6", and he is who he is, I felt this is a sport for me because everything else is not for me, I promise you. Ray,
You and
to
me
you.
both. You
yeah,
and me
there
both.
we go.
But obviously, we're talking about the World Cup in 2026, but what we haven't talked about is we have the Club World Cup coming
Right.
here this
Can you
year.
explain
in June
to
and
the
July.
audience? Yeah.
So the Club World Cup is the Barcelona team, it's the Real Madrid, it's the Inter Miami club teams that will be playing here. It's the first time that FIFA is having what they have titled the Club World Cup. And if you watch the news and watch whenever the news goes into the Oval Office, sitting on the right there is this giant trophy, which is the Club World Club trophy that will be awarded to the winning team. We have 8 matches here, right, for the Club World Cup coming up this summer, starting in June. And so, just again, another layer of a mega event. It won't be as big as the World Cup, obviously, but it's kind of a warm up, if you will, a little practice for us, especially, from the host committee, from the county services. We're looking at this as a way of almost test riding a little bit of what we're planning.
Yeah, important point. There is no host committee for this. FIFA's, the FIFA International is doing this on their own. But we are going to take advantage of, for example, the mobility area, try some things out. Will running shuttles, for example, from the Arlington Heights station or from the Tri-Rail stop at Golden Glades, and seeing how that works. So we're going to test some concepts out with that. But it's a FIFA-hosted event working directly with Hard Rock. And so a lot of what we've been talking about in terms of the host committee and whatnot is not relevant this summer, but the lessons we learned could be very relevant.
Super valuable.
Yeah.
It's like A/B testing when you're not allowed to do it. And the other thing, one thing that just popped into my head, and this is if you hear moderators often ask, what keeps you, up at night? Well, I'm going to flip the question and ask you, what are the things that have gone more easily than you thought they would, but you thought were going to be really difficult? And I ask it because there are sometimes things that we see that we already had in place that we didn't really appreciate that helped us do something, or something we thought that was going to be really hard. With a mega event, there are so many hard things to do. Ray, do you have an idea?
I'll jump into that. Maybe I'm a little biased because of my law
Be
enforcement
biased,
background.
of course. Go ahead.
But I think working with our public safety partners, both here in Miami-Dade County, not only with the Sheriff's Office now, but with Miami-Dade Fire, Miami-Dade Emergency Management, and all the local municipalities, City of Miami, Miami Beach, Coral Gables, everybody is coming to the plate and coming to the table to be a part of it. Just yesterday, the CEO and I were up in Palm Beach County for a meeting through their emergency management, and they brought together all of the stakeholders that are up in Palm Beach that may have a role in this, because there will be training sites and team base camps outside of Miami-Dade County, in Broward and in Palm Beach County. So again, it's bringing all the public safety providers together. And just real quick on a flip side, and I guess it's an unintended consequence, is when you have these mega events and you go through these planning processes that take a year, 2 years, sometimes 3 years, and you're bringing everybody together, that has such incredible value when something tragic happens in a community, whether it's a building collapse or a hurricane or a plane crash. Those agencies are used to working together. They know each other, they know who to call, they know what their capabilities are, they know what their resources are. You don't have to fumble through and try to learn it, on the spot there. So it's really an incredible opportunity.
I like the football pun.
I think-
Fumble. But can you make it quick, because we're going to go to questions, or do you want to just close that out?
I'll just say, I think that Miami is ready for soccer. Last night, Mayor Suarez brought his children to this truncated museum we have, and seeing the excitement on his children, being able to see autographed Lamine Yamal shoes, shows me that we, as a community, we are going to be the best city for not only the Club World Cup, but also the World Cup, and it's going to be Miami.
Brilliant. So we're going to flip it over to questions, but I'm going to place you into a role in terms of asking questions. Here's what it's going to be. So we have heard from the folks up here And especially because we're at CoMotion, where this is a group of individuals who are bringing together extreme domain expertise and convening to figure out some of the more challenging problems our societies face, specifically around transit, but it flows into so much more. You're all innovators in this space, because what I heard, part of the really informative discussion, was that we're here, we're doing this, it's gonna go great, it's gonna be great for our city, and there are a lot of opportunities for linking in and taking this moment, like the Super Bowls before and other, and making a lasting impact. So from your guys' point of view, feel free to ask a question and think of yourself as bringing in innovation, or if you just have an I don't understand question, that's fine too. But you don't have to ask it that way, but it's fun because it then gets us all in the dialogue together. So it's open to you. And I'll even bring you the mic. Does anyone have a question? Come on. It's soccer. Because of Miami, it's amazing. I'm coming now. No? All right. We'll ask, you can think about it. We'll ask you a couple more questions here.
Is this on? Okay.
Oh, you're good. Great.
Yeah, I actually
Sorry,
do have
I didn't mean to do that.
a really quick question off the top of my head as I think about it. So how was it with the build at the soccer stadium at the airport comparatively with the transit and traffic over in that area specifically?
How does it get,
With the transit and how the development of the soccer field, the build of the new soccer stadium.
oh, the new soccer stadium?
Yes, and the train.
Well, that new soccer stadium, fortunately, is only about 35,000 folks. So it won't be hosting any of the World Cup games. They may have practices there and things like that. We are concerned about that, and we're working with the developer very closely, going through the traffic studies, both the county, Florida Department of Transportation, the GMX, Greater Miami Expressway Authority, are all working with them. One of the things we're looking to do, thinking about innovation, is we had a long meeting at City Hall yesterday. As you know, right across the canal from where the stadium is a terminus point of the MIC, the Intermodal Center, where you have Tri-Rail and Metro Rail come in. So we are working with agencies, and the team hopefully will pay for most of this, is to build a pedestrian bridge so people can literally get off the train and then cross over and go right to the stadium. It was my idea about a year ago because I used to live in New York, and I remember catching the train downtown Manhattan and taking it out to Shea Stadium.
Yeah.
There's a bridge that went over the
The 7
to go
line.
in. So, and I think so that's going to be a way we're linking now. It'll actually be, other than the arena, linked to public transportation. So that's sort of thinking outside the box to deal with that issue.
The silver lining of that development will be people in Miami will now use Tri-Rail to get to the airport to bypass the traffic, and that will get people to use mass transit.
I was still stuck on, I had an idea from New York, and I thought about it for here, and they're going to build a bridge because of my idea. That's like if I were a little kid and I had like a erector set, that's the coolest thing. Sorry, you were going to say, Andreas, sorry, more question. Go
So
ahead.
was that going to lead with the airport transit system also? Was it going to be connected, the bridge you're planning on? Okay.
Well, I mean, as you know, there's a train that actually takes you to the MIC from the airport. So in theory, people could fly in and then literally take the train to the MIC and then walk across and be at the stadium. And there won't be our new hotel won't be done then. We are building a new hotel at the airport. That won't be done in time for the MIC, unfortunately, for the World Cup.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for your question. We have another one here. It'll be our last one, and then we'll have one final question for our panelists.
You just thought of something, housing. Can you touch a little bit on planning for, making sure there's capacity for your visitors, kind of mitigating impacts on residential neighborhoods where there are, obviously I'm not sure what your ordinances here are. I'm from Dallas, so, there's some ordinances, at least as far as like what you can do for Airbnb and other types of VRBOs, kind of. So can you touch a little bit on what you're doing for housing or planning for that type of thing?
I mean, in South Florida, fortunately, because we have all these big events, we have a large pool of obviously hotels, motels. My guess is that you're going to see a much broader, coverage of geographically. Folks will be staying probably as far north as Palm Beach and as far south as South Dade. Because I think one of my senses from the World Cup, having had family who go, is not everyone's going to be able to afford $1,000 a night room at, the W on Miami Beach or something. And so folks are going to stay where they can, and probably even along transit corridors, hopefully, up and down, South Dade and whatnot. And then we also have a large Airbnb type amassing here all over the county as well. So I'm not as concerned about accommodating all those folks as we do those well, and also I think people go back and forth. So they come to Miami to watch Spain play, and then they'll go to St. Louis to watch them play there. So you'll have a back and flow. I'm not as concerned about that. I think we'll have the capacity. Could it impact neighborhoods where you have Airbnbs and stuff? Depending on the city, some have laxer rules than others. It could. And parties going on and stuff. It could. And I think law enforcement and code enforcement is going to have to be pretty active during that period.
Got it. So we're almost there. So we're going to move. We can maybe ask, you can come up and ask after. I'm sorry, we're almost out of time. So here's our last question. We're just going to go down and do this really easily. So we're at CoMotion now. Fantastic panel talking about the lasting impacts of mega events. We're an expert audience. It's the end of 2026. The games are the World Cup here, mind-bogglingly good, because I can tell. Let's just read the room. It's going to be amazing. When you look back after it's done, what are you going to be, if your team is in front of you, the most proud of thing? Not just we did the thing, but what would you think back on, at that moment and say, my gosh, this is, and it could be very personal, so you probably have different views on that.
I would say in the mobility context, everyone talks about that, Americans only want the one-seat ride, and we're not going to be able to offer that. But I do believe, and somebody mentioned that a lot of people coming here are used to public transportation.
Yeah.
If we can show people that two-seat ride, go to Arlington Heights and then get on a shuttle, or this is a lot better than sitting in a car for 2 hours.
And relax.
And I think that if we can achieve that, I think that would be a game changer going forward.
That's a lasting impact, big time. Andres?
I'm going to kind of jump into what Jimmy said, but I'm going to add not only leveraging public transportation, but also the last mile. How do we create an integrated approach? Because public transportation may not take us to the last mile, but create the ability for users to plan their trip from their starting point to their end point, taking different types of transportation, be it mass transit, micromobility, or shared transportation.
Wonderful, Ray?
Yeah, and having done the last Super Bowl here and being the president of the host committee, there is that sense of relief and joy after it's over. But really seeing, the legacies that are left, whether it's football fields in underprivileged areas or, a transportation plan that lives on beyond the games. We have a very robust legacy program that we're trying to roll out, not only with FIFA, but as a host committee and also with the county. So we want to leave that lasting impact when the games are gone.
Brilliant. And Michaeljohn?
I think that when you put this amazing, beautiful, robust county on TV, it wins. Scarface has to have some, no, truly, it has to have some economic impact on Miami. Miami Vice. Miami Vice had an economic impact
There you go. That was good.
Miami. The pandemic had an economic impact on Miami. At the end of this in 2026, when I look up past this and I look at my team, this will continue to show the rest of the world how incredible, special, diverse in every way, not only just people, but business and everything else that Miami is. It will continue to bring more business here. It will be the leader in America in soccer, and we will continue to see more business continue to flow to Miami, which will create jobs and opportunities for people. And I think that that's exactly what's going to happen and what we will be most proud of.
So with that, there you have it. I want to just say one thing. This is an amazing panel. It's an honor to get to hear how they're thinking about this. We've all experienced that. And this is from a city that's done 11 Super Bowls and so much more. That counts as the U.S.'s world-class expert at this, and they're taking it to the next level. It's always hard to be at the front of the pack, and it's always hard to take that white sheet of paper that you mentioned at the beginning and even know you have one to become even better. And here you've heard a panel describe how they're doing that. We're lucky to have them, America and Miami, and I can't thank them enough and hope you give them a giant round of applause for all they gave us.
John, if I could, I want a little privilege here, and thank you for being such an incredible moderator, and give you
John, you're handing that over. Ray, I'm sending you my email. Ray, I'm sending it too. Great job, Ray. Thank you, guys. Yes. That was amazing. Wear the scarf. Come on, wear it. That was awesome. Open it up.
Put it on.
Put it on. That's amazing. I love it. No, it's not how you wear it. Oh, Dios mío.
5'5". I can do it. I'm messy.
Thank you so much. Amazing. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was an amazing panel, great moderation, great information. We are excited for the World Cup. Let's go! Folks, but we're not done yet. Thank you. We're not done yet, folks. We do have a couple of more great panels. We'll allow them to make some room here. All right, we're going to just reset the stage 1 second. We're going to take off one of these chairs. We're going to reset, and then we're going to get ready for another great panel, Beyond the First Mile, talking about how we want to make sure we get to that last mile. So this is going to be a great opportunity to find multimodal strategies to connect mobility. So we're going to ask everyone to go ahead, have a seat, come on in for one of our second to last panel, and we're going to go ahead and welcome Kathy Dos Santos up to the stage and get things kicked off.
Thank you, Vivian, and thank you to the CoMotion team. Thank you all for being here in a very un-Miami fashion. We're actually going to get started early, and we're going to get the ball rolling. Welcome all to Beyond the First Mile, Multimodal Strategies for Connected Urban Mobility. Today, we're exploring how cities can build truly integrated transportation. And I know folks are still mingling there. The excitement is going from one panel to the next. But we're gonna be showcasing some groundbreaking projects from Bogota's Transmilenio to aerial transit in LA. And there are innovations that are truly redefining urban mobility. What makes this panel, in my opinion, particularly exciting is that we have a very diverse expertise from our speakers. We have professionals who have approached transportations from different backgrounds, but they all share a vision that cities should be built for people, not just cars. And so let me introduce them to you. Our first panelist is Michael Manley, Director of Sales at Lehner Poma of America. Michael brings over 30 years of experience in mountain resorts and operations and ropeway technology, literally going from slopes to ropes. I had to. At Stowe Mountain Resort, he managed the installation of numerous lifts and infrastructure projects, and he has developed a deep understanding of how aerial systems can deliver exceptional user experiences. Today, Michael helps cities reimagine urban mobility by showcasing how ropeway technology can provide cost-effective transit solutions that overcome geographical challenges while creating memorable journeys for their riders. Also joining us is David Granis, Executive Director of Zero Emissions Transit and a self-described generalist who has shaped mobility in California for 4 decades. David started as a history major at USC and has become a master strategist for transportation innovation. He's currently leading the LA Aerial Rapid Transit Project, LART, and it's creating a high-capacity aerial gondola connecting Dodger Stadium to Union Station. David has also pioneered employee mobility programs for major companies like NBC Universal and worked on Disney's mobility master plan. His work is defined by consistently finding ways to align transportation solutions with a triple bottom line: people, planet, and prosperity. And rounding out our multimodal expertise is Felipe Ramirez, Urban Mobility Director at World Resources Institute, and he is bringing global expertise from his transformative role as Secretary of Mobility in Bogota and CEO of Transmilenio. Felipe has successfully implemented sustainable transportation systems that prioritize equity and accessibility, and his unique strength lies in navigating complex governmental environments, a really good skill to have in mobility and transportation. Felipe's comparative knowledge of best practices from Asia to Latin America offers really valuable insights for cities to enhance their multimodal networks. So, without further ado, we're gonna get started. Hello, hello. Can people hear me? Yes, perfect. All right. Thank you all for joining today. We want to start with a foundational question for all of our panelists to answer. First, how does thinking about transportation projects as part of a holistic multimodal network change our approach when we're talking about planning, funding, and implementation compared to traditional single mode projects? David, can you get us started?
Be happy to. Hello, hello, hello. There we go. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kathy, and welcome everybody. So, holistic thinking, in my view, about transportation in general, connected mobility, is really, it's the connective tissue, right? Think of it as the connective tissue from my perspective. And what that means is it connects to every event in a person's life. So that's home, work, education, art, culture, recreation. All of those events require connected mobility. Boils down to choice. If I had to put it in one word, I think it's choice. And what that means is by thinking more holistically and looking at that, all those daily events of people's lives and choice and providing more choices, that actually broadens the stakeholder pool. More and more people are engaged in that. More people have a stake in that connected mobility outcome. And as such, thinking holistically and how that ties to affordable housing, how that ties to employment and economic development, et cetera, that brings more people to the party. More people to the party means more momentum to get your projects done.
Thank you. That sort of analogy of mobility as a connective tissue really helps to, it's literally like how we get people moving. It's every activity of their life is shaped by mobility. Thank you. Felipe, how has a multimodal approach influenced your work in transportation system in Bogota, but also beyond?
Thank you, Kathy. I would like to take from David's comment because I absolutely agree with you. And I think the other perspective of what David was saying, it's actually that when we think about multimodal transport, some people just think about trains and buses and these kind of things. But then you have to go a little bit beyond, as you were saying, and it's pedestrians, bicycles, and how we really connect and we bring access to people so they can really go to work and have access to health and so on. So the real question is what cities are doing in terms of when they are designing the transport systems in order to be able to connect all these transport modes, including the first one that we do all mornings, and is being pedestrians. No matter if we have any particular condition, disability condition or anything, but we need to be able to access to these transport modes so we can really enjoy all the ways to move around cities. In Bogota, we, I would say we are still behind, of course, what we would like to be. But we have built a very interesting network of more than 600 kilometers of cycle paths, as we were talking before the conference. And this network is connected to the main transport system in the city, which is Transmilenio. But on the top of that, I will highlight the fact that any transport project right now in the city, major transport project, includes pedestrian paths. So if we are thinking of metro, we don't just build the line, as it happens in many places I've seen in India, in Africa, or so on. We also build the metro line, and then on the top of that, we put the pedestrian paths and the bike paths. And I think in the world, right now, we need to understand that cities need to build complete streets. It's not anymore about just one specific transit infrastructure, but we need to understand that every single street has to have accessibility for any transport mode. And that's where we start getting this connection between this multimodality work that we want to have. So that only to focus a little bit the conversation on what you mentioned at the beginning. It's cities for people rather than for cars. And that means that, yes, we want to connect all these other transport modes, but then also pedestrians and bicycles.
I really appreciate the emphasis on pedestrians because ultimately, you can have amazing transit projects, and we actually have a question later on choice riders, which essentially is asking people to do what we call mode shift. So changing from using a car to using a transit system, or to be pedestrians or cyclists. But ultimately, the beautiful infrastructure project is for not if people can't get there. So that you know, the title of this panel is Beyond the First Mile, and that connectivity truly is crucial. Michael, how does this multimodal integration shape your perspective on ropeway technology?
Thanks, Kathy. I think that, you know, our technology fits really well as a feeder into existing transit networks. We've seen this implemented in a number of places. You know, recently I was visiting our installation in New York City, Roosevelt Island Tramway, and you know, it connects the island into Manhattan, but also less than a block to the 59th Street subway station, right? And then you have access to the entire city. So you know, often our technology is deployed to create that first connection into last connection, right, into the larger transit network. Another example, Cable Bus 2 in Mexico City kind of connects between two metro lines, and there's you know, the neighborhood in between now has connectivity to both of those that didn't previously exist, right? So it enhances that community. And you know, we see that a lot where our technology can be used to kind of connect those neighborhoods into the larger system, you know, enhancing what they have to offer to their residents. So.
Wonderful. I think it definitely breaks down the idea even of micromobility. Sometimes not so micro, but it really, it's like that extra connection that it can be hard to consider how do you fit it into the entire system.
Yeah, well, like in New York, you know, it kind of makes crossing the East River a pedestrian event, right? Like,
Okay, now let's discuss implementation challenges, because these large-scale and small-scale projects all come with their own particular obstacles. In your experience, and David, we'll start with you again, where do ambitious mobility projects typically get stuck, and what approaches have successfully overcome these barriers?
Everywhere, right? Everybody can relate to this, everywhere. So, you know, whether it's in the project development, whether it's in, you know, systems that, you know, create kind of their own internal process obstacles, whether it's in funding, which is, you know, always the big picture, you know, problem, whether it's in delivery, in the systems that one uses to actually deliver a project. I think it happens everywhere. Let me give 3 examples of how maybe this might be viewed as overcoming any one of these problems. Not all of them altogether, but any one of these problems. And then, you know, you can fit the puzzle pieces together. So one of the projects that I'm involved in, as Kathy mentioned, is the LA Area Rapid Transit, which is an aerial gondola connecting LA Union Station, which is our regional transportation hub in Southern California, to Dodger Stadium and Elysian Park, which is the city's oldest and second largest park. In that regard, funding. So what we had is we had an incented owner up at the Dodger Stadium area who actually had always been required to connect to public transit by their conditional use permit at the stadium. And so finally, we had somebody that stepped up and said, okay, let's get that done. Because of the iconic nature, Dodger Stadium is the most attended venue in Major League Baseball. Because of that, because of Shohei Ohtani and a few other variables, World Series, that kind of stuff. So we have an ability through sponsorship and tourism to actually, those revenue streams fund this project. We've even been able to make anybody or provide anybody with a ticket to a game free ride. So we're not even charging to take you up the hill. So that's funding-wise, finding those kind of situations are really interesting. The second is really in delivery. So I was involved in the second light rail line in Los Angeles called, at the time, the Pasadena Blue Line, ran from LA Union Station to Pasadena. It's about 13 miles, 3 jurisdictions, not that far, not that hard, at-grade light rail. It had ballooned by the kind of design bid build process that LA Metro had in the works. The cost had gone from $600 million to $1.1 billion. In that process, what we decided to do is the city of Pasadena said, we got to get this thing done. So we decided to run state legislation. We took the project away from Metro. we created a construction authority. We gave it design build authority with a fixed fee contract. If the contractor guessed right, they made money. If they guessed wrong, they ate the cost. That project is the only project in the LA Metro system to be delivered on time and on budget. And we handed the keys back to Metro and said, you operate it, it's your system. The third example, I've been blessed to work on a lot of pretty cool projects in my career. I was involved in filling the funding gap for the Alameda Corridor. The Alameda Corridor is a freight rail corridor, 23-mile freight rail corridor from the ports of LA and Long Beach, a goods movement corridor to get then to the major distribution networks in Southern California. Our challenge there was the $800 million gorilla. How do we fund this? We approached the federal government. We came up with a strategy to do the very first loan, federal loan for infrastructure. That actually spawned TIFIA, the Transportation Infrastructure Finance Authority at the federal level. That loan, a $400 million loan, we had to convince Congress, who had just changed parties from, this was the Clinton administration, and changed to Republican control of Congress with Newt Gingrich, Bob Dole. We had to convince them that California should get this money, right? ABC, anybody but California was kind of the ethic. What we ended up doing is not going to each of the individual politicians ourselves. We went to the major employers in every congressional district. And we said, please, this is important to you, it's important to your business. And each of those folks, whether it would be Tyson Chicken in Arkansas or whether it was Gap in Chicago, they had a stake in this freight rail distribution network. And they went and they convinced their member of Congress, you have to support this federal loan. And we got through in record time. So those are kind of just some examples of things that you can overcome some of these barriers with. It's really important to think, the theme of Kathy's opening comment was think holistically. Thinking about how to do this, it would be counterintuitive to suggest that Tyson Chicken, would be my difference maker for the Alameda Corridor. But it turned out that, chicken played a big role.
Chicken nuggets specifically. Thank you, David. I'm hearing some really interesting things like strategic partnership and really understanding how do you position mobility as a value add to different stakeholders. Really interesting. Felipe, what were the major hurdles that the Transmilenio faced and how did you overcome them? And additionally, since your experience at Transmilenio and beyond that, are there things that you've learned better practices elsewhere that you wish you had applied or that you now want everybody to know?
Yeah, well, when I was the CEO of Transmilenio, that was the moment where the COVID hit. And then during the same moment in Bogota, we had to face the worst riots in the history of Bogota. They destroyed something around 80% of the infrastructure of the system at that moment. So we were dealing with the normal projects and the normal planning and trying to implement projects, but on the top of that, we had to think on how to do these kind of things. And one specific example of what comes to my mind, it's on that moment, I was sleeping just 2 hours, of course, trying to control the city, trying to see how to move people, because you cannot stop the service, right? This is it's like water. You cannot just cut the public transport system. So we had to deal with that, and at the same time, we wanted to bring the biggest electric fleet that in that moment was the biggest in the world outside China. And how to make sure that it arrive on time, but also what's the logistics in terms of how to make it work, implement it, and make sure that for people it's just transparent and they don't see the disruption. In that moment when the buses were arriving, we were in the middle of the riot, so we had to hide 1,400 buses on the streets so people were not rioting them and destroying them. So it's a crazy thing, and I just bring this because on the top of the normal things that happens in the projects, on the planning and so on, you need to be prepared also for these kind of disruptions that you never expect. Some of them are easier, some of them are more difficult. And I think now that I am in an NGO, like an outsider comparable when you are in office, I see the value of helping and understanding what they are living in the real life in terms of how to implement, how to communicate, how to engage with the communities, how to deal with these other processes. I remember when I was the CEO of Transmilenio, someone came to me and said, hey, I have some very new, amazing tires that I want to sell to you. And I was wondering, did this person even read what I do? I don't buy tires. So sometimes the problem is that people who is surrounding you and it's supposed to give you some advice, technical advice, they don't really read what you are dealing with and what you need. So as now an international somehow advisor, I think that's our work in terms of how to deal with it. And that's to connect to your second part of the question, how and what I've seen outside there, I think it's the same everywhere, and I think that's valuable. When you are the one who's signing and you don't understand that other countries, other cities are living exactly the same, are dealing with the same problems, you need to understand what of those problems are replicable and what's different in your own context, but it's important to share those experiences, and that helps to build and to stand on the shoulders of someone else, so you advance faster and it goes better. Another example that comes to my mind in India right now, it's they are trying to transform some intersections. Road safety in India, it's a thing. And in Bangalore, we have a project with the government where we are transforming 75 intersections. It's quite interesting because, again, it looks like easy and it looks like it's going to work somehow fast because it's just some infrastructure to reduce the space for cars and bring it back to pedestrians. But then when you try to talk with the police there, they are the first ones saying, no, what are you doing? This is the space for cars. Are you crazy? So these kind of things are, again, examples that happens everywhere in the world. So you can bring those experiences to India and tell them, hey, this is what happens. Let me show you. This is the next step. This is what's going to happen at the end of the project. So you can bring the whole picture because you are not just building from scratch. It's something that had happened somewhere else, and you can bring that experience to these other places.
I'm hearing don't reinvent the wheel when it comes to mobility. And I'm also hearing that, spaces where you can share information and understand these best practices and see case studies, because you give the example of what was happening in Bogota during the pandemic with the riots, and the reality is that civil unrest is something that a lot of different countries have experience with. I could probably look at the French quite often in terms of how they deal in Paris every time that there's cars being burned on the street. But it is you cannot prepare for everything, but it's helpful to know how others are dealing with their specific situations in terms of, okay, how do we prepare for that in some way?
But then also, I think the planning, there is a statistics that says 80% of your time should be in the planning part rather than in the implementation. And that means that if you try to take care, it's not literally, of course, but if you try to take care of every step and understand that things can change, you will be more flexible and able to change things during the moment of the implementation. And that will help a lot to solve some pressures that the teams can have during the implementation time.
Absolutely. Michael, we're going to shift to you. We know that a key benefit of, or actually, if you don't know, a key benefit of aerial urban mobility, like gondolas, is that the infrastructure required is generally not as extensive as, for example, the elevated heavy rail that we have here in Miami. Are there other types of challenges that these projects incur, even though that might not necessarily be one, or is it one actually?
No, I think you're right on. The footprint on the ground's typically quite small, and that that allows a lot of flexibility to the design, and we can be pretty flexible with where those structures are located as well in the designing phase. I think in this space, in the transit space, one of our challenges is that often our mode of transit, our technology is maybe not even considered at the beginning, right? So it's a planning thing more than anything else. Despite this being a new application of the technology is pretty mature, well tested, and proven. So, it's really about getting it getting it in the mix, and that's why we're at a place like this with all these great people to talk to them about what we can do. We certainly can't provide a solution in every case, but there are certainly cases where it's a really nice fit.
Wonderful. Okay. We are moving on. I went analog, so with the pages sometimes it's a little hard. I want to shift a little bit to the user perspective. David, you started talking a little bit about that, and you have a lot of experience on all the different mobility projects that you've worked. I want to ask you, what are some strategies that you have seen have success in terms of capturing choice riders who might otherwise drive?
Great question. I think, my experience in this regard in terms of not just employee mobility and employee transportation approaches, but some of the work I've done, specifically the Walt Disney Company, in working with Disney on what was originally to be what was called Westcott, which was the West Coast version of Epcot at Disneyland, that got morphed into the California Adventure, which isn't quite as sexy. But Disney kind of taught me, and I did their creative campus stuff as well, mobility-wise, but what that taught me was they have a passion for guest experience. And I can thread this across pretty much anything that any of us would be doing. The guest experience is paramount to them, and then to deliver that experience with excellence. So experience and excellence would be the two E's to take away. Guest experience, like for example in the aerial gondola, this has captured the imagination of a lot of people in Los Angeles. Dodger fans, if I drew a line from home plate at Dodger Stadium, they come from 50 miles around, 50 miles away, every game. So not all of them are 50 miles, but that's how far it goes out. So creating a guest experience where, you make it seamless, you can fly to a game, you get a great view, but creating that experience and then delivering that consistently with excellence so that you get a return customer, that creates choice riders, in my view. And Disney was brilliant at that. That's what they cared about, and it's what they do care about. And so, if any of you have experienced any of their many theme parks, including the exit through the gift shop strategy that they have, but those are really, really important, that notion of guest experience and excellence in terms of capturing choice riders. And I think what we're seeing in our polling for the LA Aerial Rapid Transit is we're going to capture a lot of those folks. In fact, up to 20 to 25% of attendees at every Dodger game.
Well, to your point on the user experience and the Disney example, I know that Transit Alliance, we have contemplated changing hearts and minds by sending people to take the Orlando monorail. So we hear you on that. And actually, to sort of round out a little bit more the conversation on implementation, Michael, I want to go back to you. We talked about just now user experience. We talked about planning in a way so that you can handle the unexpected. I actually wanted to go back and ask you if there are specific or general governance or structures or public-private partnerships that you think can be more effective when we're talking about integrated mobility. Essentially, how do you set it up so that from the start, you're better positioned for these partnerships?
Sure, I think, obviously community engagement is a critical piece of any transit project. We feel that getting in front of the local stakeholders and explaining to them how this can enhance the place they live, the place they work, and bring more connectivity to their lives is really critical to gaining that public support. Designing in a way that enhances the world a bit. One of the things we find is that ropeways are really an architectural blank slate, right? There's a lot you can do with the station designs, and that can become all kinds of enhancing pieces of communities.
Absolutely. I mean, I think something that it's more relevant nowadays in the conversation on mobility is almost the art in public spaces idea, not always have to quite literally be a piece of artwork, but even these stations themselves can be iconic in the landscape. I know personally, I grew up traveling a lot to Portugal because both of my parents are Portuguese, and a core memory of my childhood is actually riding the gondola in Porto that goes, and you know, it's that iconic experience. It's quite short, but it's not a hike that you want to do on foot. And it makes the experience for the people that live there, but also the tourists to come back and visit. Wonderful. And talking a little bit more on community and on community engagement, how do we balance the speed of implementation with thorough community engagement, especially when we're talking about urgent mobility needs? Felipe, will you get us started?
Yeah. No, I think, so this is something that I always, I used to do a lot in my conferences, and it's ask the people in the room, on their daily travel, if I can offer to teletransport rather than using any of the transport systems, even if it's a limo with a cocktail and so on. You will probably prefer teletransporting because you will have the time to be with your kids or whoever you want to, or use that time in something else. So when talking about transport, we always have to deal with the fact that everything that we offer is going to be negative no matter how good it is, and because it's time. So that's a very tricky thing, because even when you improve and improve and improve, there is always something that the community is going to ask for more. So that's the importance of engaging with the community, and you are selling an experience. You are trying to add a value to what people is living on their daily lives. So how to exactly do that needs to be in a very strong engagement with them, and trying to ask beforehand what are their needs, and not trying to think that you know everything and you are the one who can just tell them because the paper documents say, hey, this is what you need to do, and just go and implement. You need to understand the context and what they are living and what they are suffering. So I think that engagement is quite important. The problem is how to encompass these two things that you are asking. We need to move faster, but at the same time, we need to ask the communities. So there is a moment where, as a decision maker, you need to also realize you need to stop, you need to make the decision with enough information. I heard this from someone a few years ago, and I really like it. And it's when you have a community in front of you, and you are trying to go with a message of unity with them, you need to understand you are not building consensus. You're just organizing the dissensus. Because it's impossible in a room of this room, I'm pretty sure someone can raise their hand and say you are wrong on what you are saying. So, and that's perfectly fine. That's what builds society. It's what the way we can debate and we can build some sort of civilization, of advancing. So it is important to understand that, but also important to understand that we need to go for the action, execute, and then in that sense, we need to stop at some point, make the decision, and go for it. But of course, first of all, we need to understand what the communities are needing.
Wonderful. David, anything you would like to add to that?
Sure. I think that from my perspective, and I love what Felipe says, because I think it's spot on. I think understanding the DNA of the areas in which you're trying to do something is really important. You know, is it a regional situation? Is it a highly localized situation? Is there regional with highly localized, along the way? And what Felipe said about really understanding what communities and individuals and stakeholders care about, what they're fearful of. Fear is a big part of this. I've been involved in transportation a long time. My kind of quick tagline is that when you start a project, everybody hates it. They hate it, you build it, they love it, they were always for it. But in any event, I think that understanding the DNA and then also being very honest in your communication, explaining what the benefits are, but also incorporating into this. For example, in our LA Area Rapid Transit Project, we happen to be building this in an area where, and this doesn't sound like transportation, but this is critical to holism. So we're building this project in an area which is the oldest grid in the city of Los Angeles' Department of Water and Power system. It's 1A. It's really old. And so whenever we have a grid stress emergency, these areas go out first. They lose power. And so, you know, in the summertime, that's a lovely experience in Los Angeles. You guys know a lot about that, though, here. In any event, what we decided we could do is to actually engineer this differently on this system and provide, instead of a diesel backup system, a diesel generator backup system, we're doing an electric battery backup system, which then the Department of Water and Power can draw on during a grid emergency. We only need it for emergencies if we go down, right? And that's just to bring cabin back to station, basically. So it's relatively modest. So with all this extra battery capacity, we can turn that back over to the community to keep the lights on and the air conditioning on in the community during a grid stress event. So you're really being able to hear what those pressure points are, whether it be housing costs, transportation costs, energy costs, safety, pollution, et cetera, understanding that and then figuring out what can you do, thinking a little bit bigger, making the problem a little bit bigger. And that scares the heck out of a lot of people. But actually, that's the way to address things from a strategic solution standpoint instead of just Band-Aid things. So from my perspective, just to add what Felipe said, I think, understanding the DNA and then really listening and thinking a little bit broader. Is there something you can do to pivot that makes a difference as part of the project?
I really appreciated how you both build on the topic really well. I think we heard a little bit of the difference between community engagement versus just a community information session. Like, it's about actually getting those different opinions and that buy-in, and then actually putting mobility as literally a lifeline for communities. Really interesting examples.
I love you said that. I just want to add one thing to that. Getting a notice is one thing, but being invited to something is very different. And I think there's just words matter. And I think that's really an important aspect. Being welcoming, inviting, inclusive, very different than we're having a meeting.
Absolutely, absolutely. Wonderful. So we're getting to our last question, then we're gonna open it up to a Q&A session. But Felipe, once again, I wanted to start with you and ask you, how can mobility planners and elected leaders incorporate both environmental sustainability, but also social resilience into their urban development plans?
It's quite difficult, actually. I mean, it's not that difficult. The problem in many places is that institutionality is not ready for that. And I explain myself. Sometimes when you work in a city or a national government and so on, each of the ministers, of secretaries, or head of transport, environment, and so on, have their own stream, and they don't work together. They don't understand that it's a cross-cutting thing. So the main thing to do, especially in the developing world at least, is to understand that the plans, the environmental plan, the land use plan, the transport plan, has to talk to each other, because sometimes they are built on their own. And that affects a lot this relationship that you need to build in terms of understanding that, for example, transport has a lot, of course, to do with the environment. If you want a new road, you need to understand what exactly the plan for the city is in terms of the land use and what you can do or not. But that sounds very obvious, but it doesn't happen at all in some of the cities. So the first thing is to understand that we need to build the institutionality and to train these different institutions so they understand how to work together. This is, again, as obvious as it can sound. I was the CEO of Transmilenio in 2020, not that much time ago. And I was working with these secretaries of environment, secretary of women, secretary of planning, and we were amazed of how many things we were not really discussing on the plans that they had. And discovering each other like, oh, look, I have this plan, this is aligned to this other thing, this is completely not aligned, I'm not understanding that. And it helped us a lot to advance in a better way. But definitely, if you want to build as a city, you need to understand that you need a more holistic way of understanding. But again, as I said, it doesn't go just on the implementation side of it, but from the beginning on how you're planning your city for the next 5, 10, 15 years. And from there, you can start building that cross-cutting view.
That's wonderful. It really is so much about urban development. I'm so glad that you mentioned land use, because the reality is that you can't just pick a type of mobility and be like, we're going to put it here. It has to be informed by what's around and how people are going to get there, and actually what type of buildings you can have and housing you can have is so important to that choice.
You know what's the most interesting thing about it is, in terms of land, I think transportation is more about land use rather than any other thing. But when you go to the institutions, people don't see it that way. Transport is just about roads, metro lines, and these kind of things, and it's not that much about land use. And actually, if we want to build sustainable cities, sustainable places, we need to understand where our people is located, where they're working, where they are buying their groceries, and so on. So it's all about land use. And when we say out loud, hey, people should be moving more in public transport system, people should be doing this or that, the question is what the cities are offering. And the first offer is how and where they are, meaning land use, and the second thing is how you're connecting, again, this multimodal view, and that means if you are building a city where mobility as a service is the most important and you are really offering something that people can rely on, and your system is, again, reliable enough so people will trust on it and will use it.
Wonderful, thank you. And to close out a little bit on sustainability, Michael, I wanted to ask you, how do aerial systems contribute to these resilience goals?
Well, I think that what we're trying to provide is a connection that people enjoy, right? And a footprint on the ground that doesn't negatively impact the neighborhoods, the land underneath. Like to Felipe's point, the land use is critical, right? Being able to move through sensitive areas like parks and those sorts of areas without completely disrupting the landscape, providing something that's quiet, and then with regard to the environmental side, we're an electric technology. We've been an electric technology for 75 years. We're plugged into the grid. We're not hauling batteries around. We don't have motors moving. It's all service and lifespan is really easy to anticipate, and we can. We can really maximize the uptime based on predictive thinking about, where failure points are going to be. So keeping that, maintaining uptime, providing an excellent transport experience, and really allowing the neighborhoods and the land around the system to be minimally impacted.
Wonderful. I mean, I think you actually just touched on so many of the different aspects that we discussed today. First, when you create a special experience for users, you're giving them that choice of like, actually, it's not that big of a hurdle because I'm getting this additional value add by making this choice to connect to a public transit system. And every time that we're able to provide people the choice to leave cars behind, we're actually making a great sustainable choice. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much. Can we get a brief round of applause for our panelists before we get into Q&A? Thank you. And so now we're gonna open it up for the audience. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. I believe there's microphones going around, or we'll make its way to you.
Yeah, thank you very much to all of you. I want to speak to customer experience a little bit and about multi-modes. Work for DART, and I think DART does a pretty good job of customer experience and specifically brand awareness, making sure that our brand is on, as much as we can. I think recently, I know we redid all of our microtransit. Our brand is out there. Paratransit also. Operators are wearing our brand. But it becomes a lot more of a challenge when you're adding new modes, right? You're adding micro-mobility modes and everything, gondolas. And I know there's a gondola pilot possible in Dallas. So can you speak a little bit more to that? How does that transit agency, who needs to be the leader in reaching supporters of transit who are maybe non-users or don't see traditional transit bus and train in their neighborhood, but yet still relate to that brand, see that brand, acknowledge that brand, and want to support that brand?
We were debating who's going to go. So I'll shoot. Let me just point out that I do teach a community college class in transportation acronyms. So DART is the Dallas Area Rapid Transit System. Okay. I always try and demystify, but it's a great agency. You guys do great work. I guess my response would be as these systems grow and you're focusing more on how you reach people and how your brand is seen as all these choices combined, right? That holistic approach is that we started with is really important in terms of what's it mean, kind of writ large to the large group of stakeholders in your region. So, that bless you again. So what that means to me anyway is how you approach the region from a communication standpoint in talking about not just the services, but how this touches their lives. So for example, I don't know what it's like in the Dallas region, in the Southern California region, school trips or 15% of all of our trips. Everybody's focused on home to work, but school is a huge impact, right? At least 9 months out of the year. And so just as one possibility in terms of community colleges and colleges and education in general, communicating with a particular age group, et cetera, here's your micromobility choices, here's what it saves you economically. I mean, I think breaking it down in terms of economy, environment, and values that particular group of constituents has and relating to their value set, I think is a wonderful way of starting to really meld those services together so there's more awareness of, as you point out, as your brand. You, I'm sure, can add way more to this than I can.
No, I think you did perfectly well. So I will only add 2 things or 3. The first is, and I think you mentioned it, in my experience, you need to find champions wherever you are implementing. So what is that community that will help you to expand your communication to let people know what you're doing and how it will be used? The second thing is to understand and to trust in people too. I mean, and I don't want to use the word, but you have to understand that people is not stupid, and they will understand and they will learn and they will use it. So you need to trust. Of course, when you understand that, you have to make sure that you are communicating the right way and that you are offering all the tools needed for people to get there. And then the last thing is to make sure that in your process, you are also, I already mentioned champions. The political will, of course, it's important to have it. Sorry, I forgot what I wanted to say. I'll follow you, but it's more about how you make sure that you connect with people. Oh, sorry, yes. To remember always that out of 100 people that you are benefying, you are only listening probably to 10 that are saying this is the worst thing, because the other people will never raise their voice because they are feeling okay. So that you need to remove a little bit that noise, understand what's the real noise that you need to attend, and then afterwards you are able to communicate in a better way. Because the 90% that you are benefying out of the 10 that is making the noise, it's the one that you need to work with, most importantly. So that's the focus of your communication.
Thank you. Okay, my timer has run out, and we have to get David to the airport ASAP. So if we have one more question that we can take. Right here on the right.
One question that I had, I'm with the city of Sarasota. My name's Colby Heidke. In our region, we have a certain corridor that has, lots of congestion and fairly medium density residential and mixed use development. And the corridor is about 10 miles long. And recently, our region pursued funding for BRT. And a lot of that funding, the grants were denied because we didn't have the density that the state deemed justified BRT. So when we talk about like a holistic approach to land use and transportation planning, we kind of find ourselves in like a chicken and egg situation of what comes first, the density or the transportation. So what is like a solution that you guys have found for, I guess, those types of arguments? Like what should come first?
How do you break out of the unending cycle of the chicken and the egg?
I can answer from two perspectives. The first is, again, land use. If the planning of the city is aligned, and again, with the transport and the land use, you will have the answer because you will know in 5-10 years how many people will live there if you put this specific BRT system that will attract demand and how many people is going to use it in the future. So you will get a little bit of an answer if you plan in advance in that way. My second answer is with the bicycles. I'm not saying it's the exact same example with the BRT, but in my experience, people will say, why would you put a bike lane here? Nobody uses the bicycle here. You can tell. And the answer is, of course, nobody uses it because they will get killed if they use it. So you need to build infrastructure first, and then the demand will come. So sometimes that's an answer a little bit to say you need the offer, and then the demand will come. But again, it's not straightforward. You need a little bit of analysis, and you need transport modelers to tell you, in the future, if this happens, and this is the density you will get, then you will have this system that will work with it. And that's important because if you would just build infrastructure and build infrastructure, then you end up having people living in places you didn't want them to live, farther away, and then that will become a bigger problem because then you will need another extra transport system, or you will get more cars, and that's an issue. So planning is the basic thing here.
Wonderful. So planning as the cycle breaker for land use or transportation, planning. Wonderful. Thank you all so much. Can we get one final round of applause? And let's send off this wonderful
And a round of applause for our fabulous moderator.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
And then they're ready for you whenever Ladies and gentlemen, we do have one final closing panel. We're going to have a quick 15-minute break, and do ask everyone to please come back. Make sure you're filling in the seats up front. We have a great closing panel, charting the course, a bold vision for the future of mobility. We've heard lots of great conversations, but what's next? We'll have the new director of Miami-Dade County Department of Transportation and Public Works. You're not going to want to miss this closing panel, guys. We'll see you in a few minutes. Well done, guys. That was great. Great conversation.
You didn't have to field questions this time.
It was perfect.
And it was actually
Great.
He's got to get to.
I know, he's running. Just do 60 minutes.
60 minutes?
Yeah, it's gonna start earlier than that.
Okay, so it's gonna be at 3:30.
Más o menos.
Okay.
Maybe even earlier.
Okay.
It depends.
Dale.
Okay. Oye. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get started in about 5 or 10 minutes. We have a super exciting closing panel. We're going to have the new director of the Department of Transportation, Public Works. We're also going to have CEO John Roussant and Alex Roy, who many of you may know, getting started in about 5 or 10 minutes. So make sure you guys grab yourself a drink, use the restroom, and come right back. Let's fill up the room for exciting closing panel. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you've made it this far. Congratulations. This is the last session. This is going to be one of the best sessions you've heard all day. We have some very exciting panelists who are going to be making it into the room in just a minute, including the new director of the Department of Transportation and Public Works. We're very excited to have Stacy Miller join us. We'll have the CEO, John Roussant. We have some very exciting, controversial comments coming up, guys, so get ready for the future of mobility. A little round of applause. All right, folks, which conference did you go to last that started the last panel early? After a long day, we're getting out of here a little bit early, guys. This is really exciting. All right, you know how I love to pump up the crowd. Everyone come on in. Let's finish strong. We've got a great, exciting panel. I love it. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our moderator, Leanne Buchanan, and we're going to, guys, get ready, strap in. This is going to be a good one. This is not a panel like you've ever seen before. Welcome on in.
How's everybody doing? As our panelists grace the stage, it's the afternoon, it's the last session. Did you guys have your cafecito, your afternoon coffee? I don't drink coffee, so I have this much energy all the time. All right, if you are talking and I am as well, that's not going to work really well. Excellent. So, my name is Leanne Buchanan, and I am proud to serve as the president and CEO of the Miami-Dade Innovation Authority. And we're here for the closing conversation. And I did not tell the panelists this, but I will introduce them, and maybe you guys could just start off with 15-second kind of top-line bios, 'cause I don't want to read out your bio, but maybe start off with what's the most interesting thing about you that relates to mobility as part of your introduction. And so just to kind of frame the conversation, did y'all have a good time at CoMotion 25 Miami? So as we close out the conference, we want to turn our focus towards a bold vision for the future of mobility. Around the world, cities are facing kind of a critical juncture. There are new technologies that are emerging at unprecedented paces, but the real transformation actually demands that those who are implementing the technologies can meet these solutions where they are and be poised to implement technologies so it actually benefits end users, everyday residents, everyday government officials. And it's going to require a couple of key ingredients: collaboration, courage, and a real eye towards systemic change. At Miami-Dade Innovation Authority, we've seen firsthand how governments can become catalysts and not barriers to scaling new mobility solutions, unlocking cleaner and smarter and more connected communities. And so today, we're going to bring together leading voices from across sectors to ask, a couple of key questions. How do we ensure that innovation drives resilience, opportunity, and impact for communities? And with us, we have a couple of key leaders that represent the private sector, the public sector, and an aggregator of both. So John, Stacy, Alex, in that order, because that's the order it appears on screen, why don't you start with a 15-second top line? Who are you? What do you do? And what's one interesting thing about you that relates to the future of mobility? John, you're first. John, you're first. Is it on? Snap.
How do I do that? Hello. Okay.
Ooh,
Rely
much
on Alex
better.
for everything.
They missed a great intro.
Thank you, Vivian. I got to mobility, about a decade ago through looking at cities and how cities were developing and how cities were starting to be impacted frontally by new technologies, new connectivity technologies. And I think that's really the filter, the prism through which I look at sort of everything. It's part of the urban picture and how cities are evolving. And we look at that at a kind of global stage at CoMotion. Not only in the United States, we're quite active in Europe and the Middle East. I just kind of made a soft announcement this morning about the next big CoMotion, which will be in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia at the end of the year. Super excited about that. It's a chance not only to look at a lot of the interesting things that are happening in the Middle East, but the Middle East, in a way, is a bridge between East and West, so it's a real chance to engage the big Chinese mobility players, the electric vehicle manufacturers, autonomous players, advanced air mobility players in China who we don't know, we don't speak to, they're not present in the market, we can't bring them here. But I think for the, I don't want to be in a world where there's real confrontation, and I think, we're all about bringing people together, so that's what I'm excited about.
So you've got a global lens that you are bringing to this work.
I like to think so, and if you look here, there is quite a lot of people from Latin America,
Yeah.
from Ecuador, from Colombia, from Mexico, and we had a big delegation that the government of Spain brought in, and I think that's very typical of every CoMotion event.
Amazing. Stacy.
Hi, everyone. Stacy Miller, Director and CEO of the Department of Transportation and Public Works for Miami-Dade County. My 15-second opening salvo is I'm on week 3 of my job.
Let's give Stacy a round of applause for being up here on week 3.
So with that, I might be on the wrong panel, I'll be honest. My background is over 34 years with the Florida Department of Transportation, so I come very entrenched in mobility and mobility solutions, but given my very short tenure so far with the county, bear with me. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
So I always say that new perspectives lead to great disruptions that ultimately lead to better outcomes. So Stacy, we're so lucky to have you, and we can't wait to incorporate your perspective here. Alex.
I got some perspective.
Oh my God, not the troublemaker at all. Alex, 15-second introduction.
I'm Alex Roy, general partner at New Industry Venture Capital, and I spent 4 years at Argo AI as an executive working on autonomous vehicles, living here in Miami, which I miss. New Yorker, love trains, lived all over the world, and I'm best known for setting the illegal endurance cannonball run record in every category of vehicle: electric, internal combustion, three-wheeled, convertible, semi-autonomous. And
But for those who don't know, there may be some. Cannonball is east.
driving
coast to coast,
nonstop
yeah.
from New York to LA, trying not to get arrested. Been in jail in, as I've told you 4 times today, in 5 countries and I don't even know how many other places. That's a long time ago, because today I'm a safety advocate.
So I always say that I'm a recovering attorney. So Alex, I would say, are you a recovering street racer?
My most recent record was just 3 months ago.
Not so recovering.
But it was in a Tesla for the purpose of testing the safety of autonomous systems cross country.
But you stopped for red lights.
The car stopped at most of them.
So thank you, John, Alex, and Stacy. We also wanted to lighten up the room. Sometimes panels can be stiffy and boring. This is not going to be one of them. But I want to start with one question as we think about the future of mobility, which is really what we're focused on today. So in 2023, global investments in new mobility technologies actually exceeded $200 billion, with growth in areas like electrification, micromobility, AI-driven traffic management, and multimodal integration. So my question for the panel is this: what specific trends or technologies are poised to have the biggest systemic impact on mobility? Where are we going to see movement, and also where are there major blind spots that folks are just simply not paying attention to? Who wants to kick this off?
Why don't you choose, Leanne? Which of those?
Okay, Stacy is looking like she does not want to answer, so I'm going to call on her
I do
first.
not want to start that one. I would like
It's better
Alex.
to start, because then you set the
I know,
set the
but I
bar.
would like Alex to kind of take the lead on this one.
All right, Alex. She got a pass. You're up.
Set the
Since
tone.
you're an inventor,
Set the tone,
Since you're an
Alex.
inventor, you say
Okay,
this.
so I am a huge advocate for autonomous vehicles. I live in Scottsdale, Arizona, and ride in Waymos almost every day. I have a 6-year-old who loves riding them and does not know or care if they're safe or not. She thinks it's fantastic. And I also have a Tesla, which she wonders why it doesn't drive itself yet. And we also ride bikes. So I feel, having lived in New York and Paris and Miami, like I have a pretty good cross-section. I appreciate any mode. I'm totally mode agnostic, totally. I think autonomous vehicles have probably the most frictionless path, I know it sounds hard to believe, to becoming a useful solution. However, they must be integrated into, urban transportation systems in a thoughtful way. And what I have not seen from really anyone in the AV sector are really thoughtful approaches to engaging with cities. There are some exceptions, like Waymo is arguably the best actor in the sector today. Argo AI, when I was there, I thought we were the best. But we were having really meaningful conversations with the city about routes that went into neighborhoods that didn't have transit, about how to move people from hotels and from doctors and hospitals home, and how to deal with transportation deserts, food deserts. These were things we talked about at the office all the time. And since Argo shut down, I'm frankly shocked and disappointed at the failure of imagination from companies in the AV sector for not stepping into Miami, which is a perfect city primed for these solutions. That's number one. But number two, and then I'm done, every transportation mode prior to autonomous vehicles, unfortunately and unhappily, was politicized and became big trucks, free roads, parking, increased speed limits, generally on the right. And bicycle paths, bike lanes, protected bike lanes, mass transit trains, generally on the left. And the two sides, years before 45, 47 came into office, years before that, became completely ossified in their thinking and ability to engage with each other, which we now see on every topic. And that type of binary thinking makes it almost impossible to create a long-term plan on an urban level, because a change of administration can sink a long-term plan in terms of funding or deployment. And right now, even last week, was a critical juncture for the future of autonomous vehicles. Because up until now, they had not yet fallen onto the political continuum as a left-right solution to anything. And arguably, one could say that when Elon Musk decided to join the administration with Doge, that Tesla was immediately associated with the right, and we saw the results of that in events that followed. But there was no equivalent company on the left until last week. Thomas Friedman wrote a column suggesting that he is, as a proud American, he's a Waymo Democrat. And suddenly, Waymo is put on the board. And that is really bad. We do not want these solutions to be seen as left-right topics or solutions. They are for all people. They have to be. They have to be. And it is really important that we protect these solutions for as long as possible, such that as they're discussed at a local level, a state level, a national level, they're discussed as being beneficial to the most number of people. They get politicized later because one brand versus another, fine. But as a concept, autonomous vehicles cannot be allowed to become that way. And the way we talk about them, the way we talk about Tesla, with any luck, Musk will move on. No one lives forever, but the company will remain and the technology will remain. We should embrace any technology that is offered to a city or a state that is agnostic and applicable to a problem, and not believe in solutions that are catch-all. There is no catch-all solutions.
Alex, great. And before we move on, I just want to emphasize a couple of things that you said, which is this idea that innovation, particularly in mobility, cannot scale in a silo. It requires that we meaningfully engage our government actors, because you're not just going to be driving these cars in space. They're going to be driving on the roads. They're going to be interacting with existing thoroughfares, and it does require government to be at the table. But what's also interesting that you said is that let's focus on outcomes, because at the end of the day, the outcomes are what should drive adoption, and some of the other things could be red herrings. Stacey, you look like you want to jump in.
I just wanted to follow on. I think there is no singular solution. There can't be. Our communities are made up of a variety of different needs, and we need to listen to our communities to understand how best to serve their needs. So we need to be flexible. I think there is a variety of things that are going to occur in our future. I don't think we should politicize transportation. Transportation is for everyone. It's about opportunity, it's about education, it's about economy. But the fact is, there's no one singular solution. There's lots of technology out there that's exciting and amazing. Not all of it is going to bubble up and become viable. I think the fact is, that's what our partners in the industry will determine, is they're going to come up with all these fantastic ideas, and things are going to, there's going to ebb and flow. Some will fail. I hate to use the term fail. I really think that there's always opportunity, learning opportunities out of unintended consequences of those decisions. But the fact is, there's no singular solution. But I think government, and having been in government for as long as I have, we have to be open-minded, and we have to be flexible enough to accept that not every solution is going to be that long-term solution. There could be short-term solutions that just lead us to that next exciting opportunity. So I think we need to be flexible.
I love that you mentioned level of intentionality that we need to bring to this discussion, which is to say that we don't presuppose to know what the solutions are going to be, but there are many out there, and let's make sure that there's a fit. Before we move on to talking a little bit more about something you mentioned, Stacey, which is the role of government and how it maybe can be more flexible in helping to commercialize solutions. John, I want to go back to you, because you, through CoMotion, see everything. You talk to everybody. Are there specific trends that you see in mobility, technology specifically, that you would say are going to be disruptive that we're going to see more of, or are there specific blind spots that you want us to heed?
You know, I think there are several things happening now. One is if you look at CoMotion today, whether it's in LA or Miami, compared to where we were, 6 or 7 years ago, it's just completely different. 6 or 7 years ago, everybody really was thinking about the next big mode, the next really cool innovation, et cetera. I think today it's much more about thoughtful implementation on the ground of these things. We're seeing that in autonomous vehicles, for example. And Ron Thaniel from Zoox yesterday sort of compared 2017 with 2025. It's another universe. At the same time, there's been a huge amount of consolidation in the kind of new mobility sector. So, Cruise has crashed and burned spectacularly.
Deservedly so.
Okay, we'll I'll not comment on that, but I tend to agree with you, Alex. And real kind of failure of corporate culture there, for sure. You look at the advanced air mobility space, the recent bankruptcies of Volocopter and Lilium in Germany. The surviving companies, I think, are going to make it in the long term, but it's the finances are not great, and we're in an environment where there's a lot of uncertainty now in the coming on policies from tariffs, et cetera. So I hope that calms down for the sake of us all, because we can't live with this kind of drama every day. It's not good for business, it's not good for communities, it's not good for cities. Speaking about cities, I think, and CoMotion is really about urban mobility. We don't look at transcontinental air travel, for example. I think the sort of salient fact is that there's been a really radical change of tone from Washington, in which federal largesse is being cut off. You almost have the feeling that the federal government is anti-city, and so we have to see how that plays out. I'm kind of cautiously optimistic, because I believe that maybe it's good that cities learn to, you talk about being flexible, you're really going to have to be flexible now, because the resources aren't there. And you're going to have to be really inventive and creative in what kinds of new resources you can find and how they're deployed, et cetera. That's one of the reasons we launched the Sustainable Urban Mobility Investment Task Force yesterday. It's an ongoing thing to look at new and creative ways that cities can access financing for mobility projects in the future. So yeah, and just getting back to, I don't think I'm not sure what one mode will have the biggest impact. I think what's really going to be interesting in the next few years is to look at multimodality itself and really making that work. So you have, the seamlessness to connecting between one mode and the other. I think that's going to be particularly important here in Greater Miami, with transit, and then you have autonomous services seamlessly connecting transit to kind of last mile solutions. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out.
Just picking up on this last point, John, and I want to move into talking a little bit more about some of the systemic gaps in mobility access. Despite many advances, there are gaps that persist. When you think about the difference between urban centers, rural centers, and connecting those two types of populations, nearly 45% of Americans lack access to high-quality, reliable public transit and micro-mobility options. That's a lot. And I'm curious to hear from each of you, what approaches or partnerships do you believe are most critical to bridging these access gaps in the next phase of transportation innovation? What are things that we need to be focused on, doubling down on, investing in to really decrease that number? Stacy, I want to start with you.
I was waiting for the mic to start working. So I think it's important to really understand, and I'm probably going to be a broken record on this, but what our customers need and how they need it. So understanding that we have different resources available for different sectors of our population, but understanding how best to serve their needs. I think the fact is DTPW, working with the community, working with the commission, the mayor, et cetera, has come up with lots of innovative solutions on how to try to fill the gaps. We've created probably some new solutions that aren't being used by other communities. Metro Connect, Metro Link. We have all these other sorts of services that are in addition to what we would consider traditional transit services. So it's thinking a little bit outside the box, but realizing, again, government's not always going to have that solution. We have to really understand what our community needs are and then try to find a solution to meet that gap. The fact is, we're a highly dense urban area, the majority of Miami-Dade County, but we also have to serve our partners in Western Miami-Dade who have very different transportation needs. And marrying those two issues is very important from DTPW's perspective, and realizing, I'm not going to have all the answers and my team's not going to have all the answers. How do I find those solutions and be efficient and cost effective with those solutions? We're a big community, but people need that access. So how do I find those gaps? Fill the gaps.
I appreciate what you said about listening, because one thing I think Miami-Dade County has done so well when I think about the Better Bus network is partnering with groups like Transit Alliance, who's a partner with CoMotion, to really make sure that the redesign of our bus network met the needs of different constituencies.
And what I think is important is, yes, we listened, and there's needs, there's wants, and there's desires. And unfortunately, you can't meet all of those. We have to meet the basic needs. Wants and desires, if we had all the will and money in the world, would be fantastic. But realizing there's differences and nuances with that, and making sure that we cover needs at minimum.
But if
John,
I may, it's not only about, of course we have to listen to communities and what their demands are and try to meet those demands. But it's not only about the city as it is now, but it's the city that we want it to be in the future.
Very much so.
And so that's why I think, the whole conversation around mobility can't be divorced from a conversation about affordable housing, for example, or transit-oriented development, which is, I think, important. It's something we've been based in Los Angeles the last few years, and this is vitally important to LA. And I think finally we're beginning to think about, corridors of densification that follow transit lines. And
we're doing that
Yeah.
in Miami-Dade. It's very exciting. Last week, I went to my first ribbon cutting at Quail Rouge Station, which is a fantastic workforce housing TOD on the South Corridor, which is amazing. It's the longest 20-mile, longest BRT, electric BRT in the country. So we're doing that. That is part of that conversation. What does our community need? How do we best serve them? It's not transportation in a vacuum.
And I think I want to loop Alex into this part of the conversation, but one of the clear takeaways, John and Stacy, from what you've said, is it's not just about the mobility solutions. This is often a multifaceted challenge, which requires different competencies. It requires a competency of really gathering, processing, and implementing community input. It requires bringing other assets to the table, which is partnerships with developers to do these types of large-scale projects that meet the affordability needs, that meet the housing stock needs that we have. Sometimes we have deficits, we have a huge deficit here, but also are thinking about, if we're going to build more housing, where is the smartest, best place to build it? It's going to be around those major transit hubs, so we can lessen the demand for vehicles to be the primary modality of moving people around our communities. Alex, from your perspective.
Perfect timing, because my old friend Karina Ricks just walked in the door.
Shout out.
And I was about to name drop her. Hi, Karina.
Hi, Karina.
So when I was at Argo, and we had like internally really like wild conversations about all this stuff. And we always wondered, like, are the other AV companies talking about this? And as we've learned since Argo shut down, no, they're really not. Although the Waymo folks are probably the best there is. So I wrote a paper in like 2019, which I then discussed with Karina Ricks, which led to some interesting developments about my idea for universal basic mobility. And so this was inspired by the conversations at the time about AI and the belief that AI would eventually render most jobs irrelevant and they would just go away, and UBI was the only solution. And as I have a lot of friends, and I think I'm apolitical, but I have a lot of friends on both sides, and my conservative friends would say horrifying things like, well, we need UBI, really, because if not, people will be showing up at the gates of my housing development. And I'm like, well, that's not a great reason to support UBI. But let me see if I could play with the language and come up with a system which would bind together outcomes with incentives. And so that was universal basic mobility, which I don't own the concept, but I tried to make it coalesce around some basic ideas. And Karina Ricks in Pittsburgh was one of the first people in the United States that I'm aware of, maybe the first, to try to create these incentives and outcomes in a unified way. My idea was that public-private partnerships, all new modes, when they arrive at a city, should be forced, it's like funneled into a public-private partnership negotiation. And that the cities should make a commitment to everyone in the city to guarantee no less than 2 modes to get to work, school, and social gatherings. And then allow private enterprise to show up to try to offer solutions to one of those 2 modes. And that guarantee would allow for flexibility in the construction of affordable housing and allow for flexibility in the servicing of existing developments, commercial or residential, which just want less traffic. And I then joined Argo, I think right after that, and then the conversation internally at Argo was, is there some function in Miami or any other market where Argo planned to go? Is there someone in local government that we could talk to about reducing the friction for discussions with commercial developers? And there were many people, but there was no formal process for doing that. And so we began going and talking to real estate developers and asking them, before they broke ground, what's going to go here? How many people will work or live here? And can we negotiate an agreement to provide AV services here 4 to 6 years from now? And so that was a great idea, and then Argo shut down. But the roadblock we encountered across all these efforts was that media coverage of these new modes was so unrealistic and such bullshit that in cities that were less prepared and with officials who were less educated than Miami, city officials in many other parts of the country in smaller cities would think that autonomous vehicles were 12 months away. Therefore, don't invest in anything because they will solve everything, which, as you pointed out, is absurd. So I firmly believe that there is a framework around this UBM concept, which binds profit motive with governmental need to help stakeholders, starting with where Karina went, and maybe evolved. Now, you're covering your face, but it was a noble effort, and there were great learnings there. And we need more of this. Incentives, carrot, not stick, just carrot for the private sector. And the stick is implicit, because if the private sector doesn't come with solutions that fit into community needs, there is no innovation to be deployed. But let the private companies innovate, let the city kind of guide them, and make that commitment. And it can never be one mode commitment, it's got to be multi-mode, because we never know how a community will grow over time. And they need to have the flexibility to grow based on like a short distance mode and a long distance mode.
There's so much in what you've said that I do want to dig into a little bit more. And starting with, how do you shift the incentives and how do you change how we think about integrating innovation into government? A lot of times, programs like Miami-Dade Innovation Authority's Public Innovation Challenge have shown that de-risking early pilots for local government can significantly shorten that path from startup innovation to scaled impact. However, scaling is still one of those significant challenges. So I guess the question that I want to throw back to the group is, what do you believe are those key ingredients beyond capital that cities and innovators need to align around to move past isolated pilots to widespread adoption? Stacey, I want to start with you on this one.
Okay. I have a couple of thoughts.
Losing mics left, right, and center.
I'm going to hopefully be able to get all of them clearly articulated. I think to a certain extent, the procurement process for governments is very complex. Often, I'm not going to say needlessly complex. I think there are checks and balances for a reason. But that procurement process and having experts assist governments to produce really great RFP packages, right, requests for proposals, and to really understand what the goal is, not to prescribe too much of it, but really what is the end result that we're looking for, right? Safe, efficient mobility, right? That's reliable. How do you package that to allow people to then participate in that activity with you? But I think procurement is an important aspect. So is risk analysis and risk sharing. There is always risk aversion for both the government and our partners, and how do you share that risk across those contracts? Another element, when you're talking about long-term public-private partnerships, these are mortgages. You have to understand what the length of a concession will be, what the length of that technology will be, and how best to serve that. What is the length of that contract? How best to utilize that? So I think there's a number of different components associated, and sometimes government should just get out of the way and let business do what it does best. If we provide great infrastructure, there's the opportunity for startups and others to come and really do amazing work where we just provide that base infrastructure and we don't really have to do much more than get out of the way.
Yeah, it's about understanding really the role and where you're best suited.
The problem is, I mean, putting in that basic infrastructure is really complicated in the United States and takes a long time. And I think, one of the things we have to think about is how to make all of this process more efficient. We need smarter regulation, yes, but we need to find ways just simply to do things faster. And you're grimacing.
I'm smiling. That wasn't a grimace.
Oh, you're smiling. Okay.
I mean, I think
Okay,
we're always trying to do things smarter and faster and more efficiently, but there's steps to a process. And what often happens is when you try to circumvent that, we end up getting caught by something on the downstream of that. So I think you just have to understand what the box is and then understand how to work within the box.
You know, it's interesting, and I want to push on a word.
I'm an engineer. I'm sorry. It's the engineer in me. I apologize.
So you've got an engineer, a lawyer.
I've spent
John,
a lot.
But John, I want to ask this question, sure, and I want everybody to answer it if you can. The elephant in the room is often procurement, which tends to stand as a barrier to do what you're saying, John, which is how do we move smarter? How do we move efficiently? How do we actually get these solutions from out here at CoMotion into where Stacey's operating? And I think at MDIA, we are looking at how do we flip the script? So Stacey, you say there's a box we should stay within, and I say we don't need a box. We need to reimagine that perhaps an RFP is probably not the best way for us to find solutions. We believe that pilot-based open challenges where we say we're clear on the problem, we don't know the solution because we're not the private sector. Come with the solution and we'll provide that infrastructure for you to implement fast might be the right way to go. So John, I want to hear what you think is the right model. Stacey, I definitely want to hear
I'm dying
what you
to just
think
say,
is the right model.
I said you have to understand what the box is. I didn't say the box has to stay the same.
Yes, let's get rid of it.
I mean, I really think
there's always a framework.
Absolutely.
You just have to change the framework, but you have to understand what that framework is. It can be throw out the framework, but that's a framework in and of itself. So I don't want you to think that I'm anti-innovation. In fact, I'm anything but. I am always looking for that alternative solution, for that better way of doing it. But you have to at least understand where you came from, where you're going, and propose the solution, right? Propose the outcome of what you're looking for. Let people then find that solution for you.
Excellent.
But that box doesn't have to stay the same. So I apologize if I made you think it did.
And we're partnering together to get new solutions.
Yes, we
in
are. Very
the
excited
fastest
about this.
ever. John, I want to hear from you, and Alex, I want to hear from you around what are these structural barriers? Do we get rid of the box? Do we create new boxes? How do we make this faster, more efficient, and get some of these new solutions, at the end of the day, to our constituents who ultimately need to have access to get around their communities?
I don't know. I mean, I wish I knew what the silver bullet solution was. But I think, for example, in Miami, how is it possible that this great city has not figured out, we discussed this earlier in the green room, we have not figured out a way to get from Miami to Miami Beach over water. It's, you know, there are many, many solutions, sort of electric ferries, hydrofoils, whatever. There's nothing. How is that possible? It's something the city really needs, you know, and how is it possible that any second-tier European city with an airport has a transit line? You get off the plane, you walk a few steps onto a metro, and you're in the center of the city in 10 minutes. You know, name one American city where that's possible. And I just, there's something that's, sorry, apart from Miami. Thank you.
I was going to say there are several cities, but it's more than 10 minutes.
Yeah, but it's the exception that proves the rule, I think.
Yeah.
And or you look at the state of, you know, I mean, Miami Airport's nice, but I think you look at European airports now or Asian airports, the efficiency. And you know, we're falling behind in so many ways. And this question of speed, I don't know what the answer is. I wish I did. I mean, I think it's part of our governance system where we do have many layers of authority, and God bless it, that's what makes America great. But I worry that, you know, our cities need some quicker solutions to getting around, et cetera, and to kind of bringing that multimodal future that we want.
I think all of you have hit on an underlying issue, which is really the role of narrative in shaping public trust, which then translates to the rate of adoption. Ultimately, public acceptance here in the United States can make or break the success of how new mobility solutions, whether it's autonomous shuttles, congestion pricing, electrification, getting out of the airport and going straight to the train, which you can do in DC, right at the metro. But that can make or break how fast and how efficient and whether things get adopted. I think you asked the question, why do we not go straight over the bay? Well, I think it's a political public issue. It's not that we don't have plans and we haven't proposed it and we don't know how to do it. So I think that the next question that I have for all of you is, what strategies, narrative, engagement, or otherwise, are actually most critical for building public trust and accelerating the adoption of new technologies? Because here, the public has say. If you think about other countries, maybe China, for example, they'll just build and then say, okay, use it. Whereas we have, you know, we've got this crazy thing called due process. We have these checks and balances. Ezra Klein just came out with a new book, Abundance, where he talked about how sometimes death by consensus or all of this public input has actually stagnated the pace of solving some of our most critical mass transit problems. So what are your solutions? What are the strategies you think that actually work? Alex.
Go for it, baby.
You could start.
Why don't I move back to Miami and run for office?
There's one, run for office.
I'm so glad you brought up narrative because my fund, one of our twin theses is the concept of narrative command, and that in every new vertical, a company emerges that defines a long-term vision, that defines the language of discourse in that vertical, and makes it almost impossible for anyone else to function, raise money, or hire in that vertical, for better or for worse. And examples of narrative command companies would be Tesla is an obvious one in electrification and to some degree autonomy, but they exist in every vertical, figure and humanoid
Although,
robotics.
wouldn't you say that Tesla is perhaps losing that command of the narrative?
We could do a whole conference about that,
Yeah.
and I'm holding one in
Next
July.
question for
But,
this one.
in this specific case, this goes back to the concept of politicization of solutions, because it is so obvious that there should be a train or the people mover or whatever you call it from the mainland to the beach. It's so obvious. Like if you were building the city from scratch today, or if you've ever played Sim City, you know that you want to have a train go from the mainland to the beach. It's good for business, it's good for everybody. Likewise, 25 years ago when I came to visit Miami, every person I knew here, whether they could afford it or not, and especially if they could not afford it, they had a great sports car that they would drive from wherever cheap hotel they were staying to the most expensive restaurant or club they could find to park in front, because that's the purpose of a cool car in Miami. And I still do that. Now, and yet today, hardly anyone does that because traffic is so bad in Miami Beach on Friday night that even if you could afford to spend an unlimited amount of cash to valet the car to park in the front, the valets will not park in the front because the valets care about throughput, which is the opposite of what people who have nice cars have in Miami Beach think about. So throughput is everything, and it's the only metric that matters because it's better for business, it's better for you to get to school, the doctor. So what's missing here is that every solution to all these problems is pre-politicized, except autonomous vehicles, which are now going to be politicized, which sucks. So leadership, either the existing leadership or a new generation of leaders have to come out and take narrative command of the solution for the city, which is everybody hates traffic. Everybody hates traffic. And yet no one is coming out and saying the solution to traffic is threefold. We will tax parking in Miami Beach on Friday nights 200%, but we won't do that until we have two other modes in place to get you there. But doing one and not the other is a guaranteed failure. People say these things can't be done, that leaders cannot take narrative command. One doesn't have to like the president. In fact, many people don't like him. But you cannot deny that he absolutely commands the narrative and the landscape of discourse around everything he does. There's no countervailing person. But take it to a more innocuous example of how a leader makes a difference. I'm a total believer in like the great man theory or great human theory of leadership in history. Mayor Bloomberg. I worked for Mayor Dinkins briefly and briefly with Giuliani. When Bloomberg came in, he was completely different because here was a guy who transcended the traditional definitions of political roles and leadership and said, there's no more smoking in New York City nightlife. As someone who used to own bars and clubs and smoke like a fish, I'm like, oh, that'll never work. And I went to a funeral of a friend of mine on the Upper East Side, and Bloomberg came out of the subway station with his bodyguards and walked right past us. And he says this, he looks at us without even slowing the pace of his walk, and he says, and we're smoking in front of the funeral home, and he says, why don't you put that shit out before you join your friend? And he brought that to every topic in New York City. And so where is that leader who will unite the controversial solutions under one outcome, which is Miami is an easier place to get around? Until you have that leader, all these things, which if we get them to work, we'll have a slower rollout to that final outcome. But it is entirely possible. And we see it when LaGuardia Airport becomes good. We see it when Waymos are ubiquitous in Scottsdale, where I live. And you're starting to see it in San Francisco, where there was a lot of opposition to Waymo, but a lot of it came from bad faith actors. And once they were deployed, the good faith centrists came out and said, oh, well, it's actually okay. So I'm actually a huge optimist for Miami, having lived here, because I think of all the cities in the country, it's the one that has the greatest opportunity and the least friction in its current state.
Before we hear from John and Stacy on this point, Alex, two things that you mentioned. Ultimately, when we think about shaping public trust, it boils down to leadership, because we need someone that can create that unifying vision that our community can believe in and support, and by support they mean vote. And the other thing that you mentioned, which was interesting, which is part of narrative ownership, is this idea that you create the standards. I think about those organizations that are out front in a particular technology, and they're creating the data standards. If you create the data standards, then you kind of own the vertical for at least that early period. And so the question I think here is who's going to both create the standard and unify the community around a particular vision? John or Stacy, which one of you wants to take this question next?
Ooh.
Don't all jump up at once. I can choose people, you know. Stacy, we'll go with you.
Well, thank you, Leanne. I appreciate that. Wow, I'm not quite sure how to answer that. I think a lot of this has to do with transparency and being able to clearly articulate what that vision is and what the goal is, but in a manner that allows the process that we currently work within, right? That narrative that we work within is allows that transparency and can, I'm trying to figure out how best to say this, because ultimately the expectation is, can we produce these products fast enough for our communities where the narrative doesn't continue to change, the prices don't continue to change, the regulations don't continue to change. All of that happens, right, around us, but do we have the opportunity to make that happen regardless of all of those other issues? And are we being honest with our communities about what we can accomplish in the time frame that we're given? There's a lot to be said for that. I think that's why in so many instances our ideas don't come to fruition. We keep being redirected, and the timeline keeps getting further and further away from the original goal.
Yeah, I think it's important when we talk about vision, we need to differentiate having a vision of what could be from promising a moonshot. I think moonshots are great, but it's important to your point, Stacy, that we are making sure that we preserve our trust, the trust that the public has in institutions, by being realistic. And it's a difficult thing to balance because, as you will get to know as we work more closely together, I'm a big fan of a BHAG. My team is like, slow down. I'm like, move faster. We can do this. And each time we set a BHAG, we inevitably accomplish it. But this is in a small confine of a specific project. And so I think it's important to have the externally facing narrative and promises and vision, and then that internal plan of how you're going to keep accelerating movement and driving towards outcomes in a way that still ensures that you have that confidence from community.
And from my perspective, these are expensive projects and expensive propositions. The trust that we build with our community is all about how much money are you spending and how long will it take to get to that solution.
Excellent. John?
I would say, I'm not a Miamian, but, I come here a lot. And I would say that this city is actually particularly well served by both the mayor of the county of Miami-Dade. I'm on delicate ice here, I know, thin ice here, and by the mayor of Miami in particular. The Suarez, and every CoMotion we have every year, both come. And I think that, they really do complement each other. They have complemented each other in a very smart way. And this is really from an outsider. The mayor of Miami-Dade, she does really a good job, I think, explaining in simple terms what the county needs, how it needs to move forward. Francis, does the vision thing about whether it's the crypto capital of the world or, the capital of capital, et cetera, that you need that also. I think you need a kind of vision. You need to inspire people. You need to make people dream. And that's why you get up and want to do things in the morning. So I think, I would love to see that more in Los Angeles, for example. I would love to see that, which is, the problem of LA is that it's, we have 88 municipalities within the county, and it really is ungovernable in many ways. But we won't go there. But I think governance actually is a very important question, and how do we improve that? I mean, it'd be great to have a single mayor of LA County. I mean, it would just make everything faster, more efficient, and, but that will never happen, I don't think, so.
It's interesting that you had a juxtaposition of two of our elected officials, because they are amazing leaders in their own right, but definitely bring different talents to the table. Mayor Suarez is definitely an ambassador. He's absolutely an ambassador. And Mayor Levine-Cava often says she's the collaborator in chief, and she's focusing on making sure that we have a future-ready Miami-Dade County, particularly as it relates to transportation and mobility. And when Mayor Levine-Cava talks about future-ready, she's often talking about what can we do today that will have dividends and outcomes for the future. I think there's a proverb, an indigenous proverb, I don't know if it's Native American or the other, that often says we will plant seeds for trees under whose shade we will never sit. But it doesn't mean that we should not make those investments now. It doesn't mean that we should not be thinking, as many Native American communities think, 7 generations down the line, of what are really the implications of our actions. So I know we're running short on time, and as we close out for our final question, I want us to make bold predictions. As you think 10 years down the road, if we succeed in getting mobility innovation right, what's one metric, whether environmental, resilience, social, economic, that you hope we can point to as a measure of success? How will we prove that what we're doing now is successful? I'm not going to pick. I'm going to let you jump in. Stacy? Nonverbal cues.
No. I think for me and for my team to be able to say 10 years from now that we've been successful is that we have provided reliability in whatever mode an individual or a package is moving in. It's a reliable, safe service. However, that individual or package gets from point A to point B. Freight is just as important as the movement of people, and I don't want us to think that we disregard the economic engine that is moving freight throughout our communities, but it's having a safe, reliable trip. That is a measure of success 10 years from now, because I can't solve congestion in 10 years, no one can. But if I'm moving towards that solution and I've made progress there, I call it a win.
I love that. Reliability begets trust, and trust is ultimately the driver of an effective transit system. Alex, what's your metrics of success?
Well, until teleportation arrives, the time from A to B will always be non-zero. So the best metric is, to have a hierarchy of modes, or not a hierarchy, a list of modes, and that to get from A to B, pick a location somewhere in the mainland where the person who works in Miami Beach comes from, and then there should be a city manager dashboard, but it's transparent to the public, which shows the time from A to B during rush hour to get from A and then B back to A. And that those numbers must always be coming down year over year, like the stock market is up. You want it to go up, your transit time should always be coming down. And if they stabilize, fine, because in a great city will always be someone who complains, and that's fine. That's a sign of health. Some say traffic is a sign of health, and in many ways it is. It's just too much traffic. We all hate it. So that is it. But for that to work, everything upstream of that must be baked by a strong leader or a set of leaders who are willing to say, look, you want to drive? No problem, but you're going to pay for that.
Yep.
You don't want to drive? We're going to provide protected bike lanes. And if you insist on driving, parking is going to become more expensive. Everyone must have I'm pro-choice in how transportation choices are made by people. But I like to say I'm also pro-life, in that every mode needs to be safe. And unrealistic expectations of safety are the death knell of innovation. Because if every vehicle was autonomous, made by one company, there would still be crashes and fatalities. So we need to get off this crazy perch of unrealistic expectations. And I'm sorry, community stakeholders need to be told harshly in public that their expectations are unrealistic. But give them something awesome too, which is the dashboard of things are always getting better. So they can make choices of job, work, and home that are downstream of the options we give them.
So transparency around the ability to move within a community, but also that downward trajectory and how long it's going to take.
Actually, let me, if I may add, my bold prediction is that somewhere it'll be a purple state, not a blue state. A purple state or red state is going to get really creative in how they engage with these mobility innovators, and there'll be some system extrapolated from talks that we had at Argo back in the day, a system by which multiple companies will be allowed to operate in a city in return for some minor contribution to like a city fund. So AV operators, 3 might get permits to operate in a city, but every mile that they drive without a passenger, gives $1 to the city. So they're incentivized not to deadhead drive around the city. And that fund then pays for all the protected bike lanes and subsidization of other modes. So there's an equilibrium between the public-private partnerships with incentives all around. And
Alex, you told me that if we went too long, I'd cut you off. So to be continued on his answer after this. John.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Stacy and Alex have said, so I won't add to that. But I would add one thing in terms of what I would like to see in 10 years. And that is, and we haven't really talked about it in this session, but I would love to see a radical decline in carbon dioxide and particulate pollution in our cities through more sustainable modes of mobility. And I think that is really so important. We sometimes forget that, and I wish that the current administration in Washington kind of corrects the course a little bit on how it's thinking about all of that, because I think we just can't go backward. It's silly, and we have to clean up our cities. I mean, if you look at the Port of Miami or Port Everglades and those cargo ships coming in and the drayage trucks on diesel, and what that does to communities who live on those lines, and it's an acute problem in Los Angeles, where the ports of LA and Long Beach account for 40% of all of the goods coming to the United States, and you have these levels of cancer along the kind of Alameda corridor in Los Angeles. It's terrible. We have to clean up our cities, and particularly for Miami, it's a city on the water, and so much of maritime mobility is still carbon-based. I mean, there's 1% of 1% of the boats are electric. I mean, that really has to change. So, that's sort of my hope for 10 years from now, in addition to what Alex and Stacy have said.
So John, Stacy, Alex, thank you so much. You heard it here. We've got a bold vision for the future of mobility. Clean, safe, reliable, efficient, and ultimately that's going to serve future generations to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Stacy, Alex, Leanne, John, for this really fun panel. I'm going to take a quick picture. And as they take the picture, I just wanted to thank a few of our partners and supporters who made this event possible. I really wanted to start by Miami-Dade Innovation Authority, Leanne, Connie, Paul, your team, thank you so much for your help. Obviously, Miami-Dade College, we are so happy to be here. Pedro Santos, thank you for all your help always since we've been here. And obviously, Madeline Pumariega for opening the conference and for supporting us. Oh, I see Pedro here, thank you so much. We're really thankful. Thank you also to Miami-Dade County, to the Department of Public Works and Transportation and Public Works, Juan Mendieta for everything you've been doing since the very beginning, Doug Bermudez, and obviously Mayor Levine Cava, and Stacy Miller, thank you as well for coming here just when you've started the job. So thank you so much for laying your vision here at CoMotion Miami. Also wanted to thank the Miami Parking Authority and our lead partner, HNTB. I see Beth Kegel here, who's been an incredible supporter since the beginning and who's really turned HNTB into a permanent fixture of CoMotion events. So thank you so much for your support. Thank you to all our other partners who've made this possible, and thank you to the AV team, to the production team, to Frank, to Ingrid, Carmen, Giselle, Eddie, Juan Carlos, Alejandra, Surel, Carlos, Luis, Miguel, Teresa, y Severine. They really make this event possible. You cannot do an event without all the people who do this. So, the small hands, thank you very much. It really is a great team. So thank you, gracias, and thank you. Merci to our team also, Alex Quesales, Jake LaFoley, Jed Higgins, Shailene Beckton, Dan Epstein, John Penny, and a really huge thank you to Vivian Mertetis, because she was in pain the other day. She could not move. I tried to send her home, but she wouldn't, and she's here, very tired, but so thank you so much for really pulling this through. And finally, thank you to John Rossant, our founder, for this ever-ending vision. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Tim.
Voilà, see you in LA, in Riyadh, and next year in Miami.
Yeah.